What a beautiful graduation. Oh, Roger.
Oh, Mama.
Roger.
Mrs. Thomas.
Oh, and rerun.
I'm staying out of this.
Dee, weren't you proud of your brother?
Well, let me put it this way. He didn't get on my nerves.
Not every little girl's brother was Valiant deodorant.
Valedictorian.
You got it.
Valiant deodorant.
Oh, Roger, your speech was just marvelous, darling.
All because of you, Mama.
Oh, and you both look so wonderful in your caps and gowns. Just wonderful.
You sure acted silly, though, Rerun.
It was a simple mistake, Dee. I was so excited I forgot how it was supposed to go.
How it goes is when the principal hands you the diploma, you're supposed to throw your hat in the air, not the principal.
Come in, Dwayne.
Hi. Well, there they are, the graduates, all right. And here's my buddy, the college man.
Yeah.
And my other buddy, the you better find a job man. No, really, Raj. Man, I really want to be up there with you guys.
Hey, next year, Dwayne, you'll be graduating and we'll be sitting in the audience.
Yeah. Oh, Raj, man, did you tell your mama yet?
No.
Tell me what?
Oh, no, let me get that for you, Mama. Thank you. It's, nothing, really. It's nothing.
When it takes them that long to say something is nothing, nothing is usually something.
Well, what is it, Roger?
Well, Mama, did you, pay attention to my speech tonight?
Did I pay attention? How many children did I have graduating today? Of course I paid attention.
Okay. Well, what did you think about the part where I said, we stepped into this high school as boys, and we're walking out as men?
Ah, that was beautiful.
Did you agree with that, Mama?
Oh, yes.
Except for Rerun. He stepped in as a boy, became man halfway through, and walked out as a senior citizen.
Dee, Mama, did you hear the part where I said, and as men, we must now give to society and stop taking?
That was my favorite line. Taking.
You know, Mama, my favorite sentence was, and so we graduate not only from high school, but from dependence to independence.
That was your favorite sentence?
Mm-hmm. And what was yours?
The one you began. In conclusion.
I enjoyed the whole speech, Roger, every word of it.
Yeah, but did you agree with the Mama?
Of course.
Good. Because as a man now who has his independence, I felt I should have my own apartment.
Your what?
Apartment.
You should have your own apartment.
Yes, I should have my very own apartment.
And move out of here?
Well, after all, I am a man now.
So how come you keep saying apartment?
Roger, tell me about this apartment.
You'll love it, Mrs. Thomas. It's great.
And did you take this apartment yet, Roger?
Of course not, Mama. I wouldn't do that without first talking to you. We just looked at it. But I really love it, Mama.
You do, huh?
Yeah, Mama, I really do.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Okay, Roger. Have you considered the fact that someone would probably want you to pay rent to live in this apartment?
It's only $160 a month. That's $20 a week, Mama, including utilities and everything. And Rerun is sharing it with me.
Yeah, Mrs. Thomas, I got a part-time job at the pizza parlor now. And I'm going to start full-time next week.
And, Mama, I'm getting a better job, too. And the college helps you find part-time employment. Like, you know, we'll be able to make it. Now, what do you say? And Mama, I'm close by. I can walk here in 10 minutes. Now, tell me it's okay.
Tell you it's okay? Do you think it's easy for a mother after 17 years to tell her son that he can just move out of her home and be on his own? Do you think that's easy, Roger?
No, Mama.
But then again, whoever said that being a mother is supposed to be easy? Okay, I'll look at it.
Oh, Mama.
I can't breathe.
And step right this way. Now, this is our deluxe apartment.
Isn't it beautiful?
Look at this fantastic view now. Love it, love it.
Miss Thomas, where do you see the bedroom? It's right over here. Come on, let me show you over here.
No, Mom, he can't. There's only one person can fit in the bedroom at a time. And unless we get rid of the bed.
You're kidding. You're not kidding.
Frankly, Mrs. Thomas, I think with some imagination, we could do wonders with this place. I mean, I see drapes at the windows, and I feel fabric on the walls, and plants, lots of plants all over the place. And reds, the place is just crying for reds and plaids. You know what I mean? Oh, you see, I took home economics in school instead of shop this semester.
Well, what do you say, do we sign the lease?
Well, let's talk a minute, huh?
Go right ahead.
Alone, if you don't mind.
Oh, well, all right, I'll be waiting right in the other room here, where you can give me a check.
You really want this place?
Oh, yes.
All right, let's see the lease.
By all means. And now, I'm sure you'll find it's the standard lease, young man.
Okay, got a pen?
Just happen to have one handy.
Okay, we'll just make this little change here and it should be fine.
Change? What change?
Right here where you accidentally wrote 160 instead of 150.
Oh, no, that's no accident. You see, 160 is the rent, and that is final.
Well, since that's final, we're not interested, and let's go, fellas.
Now, hold it, wait a minute. I just remembered. 160 is the semi-final. 150 is the final.
Oh, this is gonna be nice.
Yeah, nice. How long is she gonna be here?
I don't know.
Will you tell her to go home?
I can't.
She's gotta go home. Those girls will be here any minute.
I know, Rerun, but what can I say?
Just say, Mama, you've been here all week. This is not your place, this is ours. Now it's time to get out.
Rerun, I can't do that. That's my mama.
Oh, thank you, Mrs. Thomas. That's wonderful. We'll see you, okay?
Oh, it's my pleasure, Rerun. You don't have to thank me. I enjoy doing it. Maybe I should just raise that hem just a little.
No, Mama, no. Believe me, the hem is just where it should be. Woohoo!
Nice.
Well, I'll see you tomorrow. Tell Dee I said hello, okay?
Okay, did you eat?
Yeah, we're eating later.
Yeah, we got a couple of buddies coming over. We're all gonna eat together and sit down and watch the ball game on the radio.
Who's coming over? Dwayne and who else?
No, it's not Dwayne. It's just, a couple of good friends.
Like who?
Dolores and Angela.
They're girls, Mrs. Thomas.
Well, I should hope so with names like that.
You don't mind, do you, Mom?
Mind? Why, of course not. Why should I mind? I'll probably enjoy meeting.
You what?
I'll probably enjoy them. Hey, I'm gonna fix some refreshments for you.
Oh, no, thank you, Mrs. Thomas. We got all we need. But it was nice of you to offer. And when they get here, I'll tell them how you would have enjoyed them. So I guess it's adios, so adios.
What kind of refreshments did you make, Roger?
Just a dip.
What kind?
What's the difference? I mean, it could never be as good as yours, so what's the difference? It's ketchup, guacamole, and pepper dip.
Well, I'll make something up for you, okay?
No, go already. What I mean, Mrs. Thomas, is that you're giving me a guilt complex because you're doing so much and my family is doing so little. So please don't give me a guilt complex, Mrs. Thomas, and go now.
Oh, Rerun, you're so sweet. But you don't have to feel guilty, though. Just think of me as your own mother. Hey, you could even call me Mama if you like.
Hi, Rod. What's happening, Frederick?
Go home, Mama, go home.
She's his mama?
Oh, no, she's my mother. He just calls her Mama.
Oh. You mean you two guys invited us up here to be with you and your mama?
No, I'm leaving. No, don't try to stop me. No, you kids should be alone. I understand you don't need nobody older hanging around. I'm going right now. Okay, I'll see you here. See you later.
See you, Mama.
I'll see you, Roger.
Okay, Mama.
Oh, do you girls like fried chicken?
What?
Fried chicken. Well, I'm going to make a marvelous batch of fried chicken. I'm going to bring it right over. Okay, well, I'll see you on the minute here. I'll see you here.
Okay, Mama.
Have fun now. I love you too, darling. I'll see you running.
You know how mothers are. Excuse me.
Let's get some music going here.
Yeah.
See, Raj, what did I tell you?
I didn't bring my stereo set because my mother, she enjoys it, and she wouldn't have anything to listen to at home.
Oh, boy. No music and your mother's running in and out? Hey, listen, why don't you guys come over to my place? I have plenty of records.
That's great.
We can't.
We can't.
Nope.
Why not?
Because my mother will be back here in a little while with the chicken. And she'll be very disappointed if there's nobody here to eat it. Hey, but we got music. Hey, hit it, Rerun. Ow! It's worth a try.
Let's go, Dolores.
But, hey, wait a minute. Just give us a chance. This is our first time having an apartment. I mean, give us a break. Well, that's the way it goes.
It didn't have to go that way, Raj, if it wasn't for your mother. She's ruining our lives. She's been over here day and night since we got the place. Why don't you just tell her to stay away?
Because she's my mother.
No kidding.
You don't like her here?
Not all the time, no.
Well, if she's not welcome here, I don't belong here either, friend. I don't understand it, Dwayne. All those years he ate at my house. My mother fed him, looked after him when he was sick, even told him to call her Mama. And then he had the nerve to say he doesn't want her hanging around our apartment. Not his apartment, our apartment.
Raj, would you be mad at me if I told you I don't blame him?
What did you say? You don't blame him?
No, Raj, I said, would you be mad at me if I said that?
Of course I'd be mad at you.
That's why I would never say that. See, I'm not saying that, I'm whistling.
Well, what are you trying to say?
Well, Raj, first of all, the most important thing is that you and Rerun are still friends with each other and find some kind of way to get along.
But nobody can get along with Rerun. 2 days ago, we went to buy a rug. I said, Rerun, let's be practical. Let's get a gray one so it won't show dust. But not Rerun. He said, let's get a red one so it won't show pizza.
That sounds like Rerun, all right.
Yeah, sure does. Now, you two get going so I can close this place up. Come on.
Where are hamburgers?
Oh, you don't want those hamburgers. No.
Why not?
Well, now, see, the way I see it, Raj, is that it should take about 5 minutes for you to realize that Rerun is right. And for you to go home and ask your mama not to come out of the apartment so much. Then when you get home, see, she'll be frying that chicken that she said she was going to bring back to your apartment. And so to keep her from getting mad, you're going to have to eat all that chicken. Now, if you have those hamburgers, how you going to eat all that chicken?
So you think Rerun is right, don't you, Shirley?
I sure do. Mm-hmm.
Me too, Raj.
Oh, yeah? Well, let me tell both of you something. You're right.
Don't tell us, tell him.
Rerun.
Don't yell at me anymore, Raj. I hated that. You were right and I was wrong. And your mother can come to the apartment anytime she wants. And I'm sorry.
No, you were right and I was wrong. And she can't come there anytime she wants.
Yes, she can.
No, she can't.
Yes, she can.
No, she can't.
Look, she's your mother.
No, she's not. Yes, she is my mother.
Yeah, I knew he'd get you on that one. That was pretty good, Rerun. No, see, what Raj is trying to tell you, Rerun, is that even though Raj's mother is still his mother, she should let you have your privacy. Right, Raj?
That's right, Shirley.
That's right.
And Rerun, I'm sorry. And I'm gonna go home and tell Mama right now.
All right. Hey, but Raj, tell her nice, though, okay?
Oh, yeah, I will.
And Raj, do you really think you'll be able to tell her?
Of course. I'm a man, an independent man. And I have to do independent man things, alone and by myself. Let's go, Dwayne.
This way, brother.
Mama, this is the best chicken you've ever cooked in your whole life.
Oh, yeah, Miss Thompson, sure is. I've never had anything anywhere near this good. Shoot.
Oh, stop. Your mother's a wonderful cook.
No, she's not. She is awful. I mean, I hate her food. Yuck, blood, ow.
What happened to your girlfriends anyway, Raj?
Yeah, why did they go home?
Here it is, Raj. Zing it in. There's your big chance. Let her have it. Look out, Miss Thomas. Here it comes.
What is he talking about, Roger? What are you doing?
Yeah, you've been beating around the bush all night. You got something to say, say it. My time is valuable.
What is it, Roger?
Well, Mama, it's about you coming over to the apartment.
Oh, I get it. Now I know why it was so hard for you to ask me. Of course, you want me to come over and clean it for you once in a while.
No, what I was trying to say is...
Oh, Roger, and I got a surprise for you. Yes, I will. And thanks for asking me, darling. I was afraid that you weren't gonna let me do that for you.
But Mama, it's
but I can't come over every day, but I can come over 3 or 4 times a week in the evenings after work.
But Mama...
Oh, Roger, you make me so proud and so happy, darling.
That's all I want to do. Well, that's it.
But, Roger, you didn't tell her about when you was going to come. Ow, ow,
I better go and give Rerun the good news that you're stopping by.
You leaving without having dessert?
No, I'm really full.
Too full for banana cream pie?
Yeah. Come on, Dwayne.
I don't live with you. My place is right here. With some banana cream pie.
Later, D.
Bye.
I'll see you, Roger.
I know.
Some banana cream pie is coming up.
Rerun. Rerun. I'm sorry, Rerun, but I have to talk to you.
Why'd you have to wake me up?
How can I talk to you while you're sleeping?
All my teachers did. What'd your mother say?
Rerun, I tried to tell her. I really tried, but I couldn't. I couldn't do it. I'm sorry.
It's all right, good buddy. I understand.
Maybe you should look for another roommate, Rerun. Someone who really is an independent man. Mama.
Hi, baby.
Hey, Dwayne.
Raj.
Hi, Mrs. Thomas. Hi, Dwayne.
Oh, Rerun. Roger told me that the girls went home, so I thought that you probably had some more of that guacamole pepper ketchup dip left.
No, I finished it. Be grateful.
I am grateful. And I'm grateful that my son has two wonderful friends. One who likes me so much that he can't tell me that I'm being a pain in the neck. And another one who likes me so much that he can.
Dwayne, you told my mama what I told her.
Oh, Rerun, what you got in the kitchen, bruh?
Yes, he told me. And he was right. You once asked me, did I pay attention to your graduation speech? Well, I thought I did. But it's really not easy to pay complete attention to anything with tears of joy in your eyes. You were right, Roger. You're a man now. An independent young man. And that means that I have to be invited over. And it also means that you have to pay for a maid. And I mean it.
I love you, Mama.
I love you too, baby.
Rerun, you left all your dishes in the sink.
I'm sorry, Raj.
Oh, and you left your clothes on the floor.
Oh, I put them away.
And what are you eating now?
Captain Chomp Chomp.
Well, if you eat it all now, you won't have any left for breakfast.
Well, then I can sleep late.
Rerun, if you sleep late, you can't make it in this world.
Raj!
Rerun.
Raj! Do me a favor. Be my roommate, not my mother.
Fair enough. Hey, I got a pretty terrific mama, don't I?
Yeah, she sure is. She's a really great sport.
Yeah, she sure is. But isn't it nice now? Just the two of us in our own apartment, a large city, ready to face the world on our own, with nobody to bother us.
Hey. Hey, how you guys like the way I helped you out with your mama? I figure that's part of my job as a buddy. Oh, yeah, and by the way, I'll be coming by sometime tomorrow or the next day, you know, to give you my decorating ideas. And since I'll be coming by on afternoons and weekends, maybe I should have my own key.
Yep.
That way I can come and go when I get good money.
You think he understands?
He understands.
Good.
Hey, does that mean I don't get my own key?
Right. How about some chop chops?
Yeah, here you go, Chomp.
Ooh, hey. Hey, Raj.
Hi, Dwayne.
Wow, man, it sure has a lot of college books. Introduction to Psychology, Introduction to Geology, what's it? An Introduction to Anthropology. Man, don't you have any courses that you've already met?
Come on, Dwayne. You know, college is really murder. It's only the first week and already I have a test in biology on Thursday, a test in geology on Friday, and a paper due in sociology on Monday.
Well, if you got all that work to do, what are you doing here?
Well, else can I study? Rerun keeps me up every night this week with his disco music.
You mean he still thinks he's the disco king?
Yeah, he met a girl at the new disco. So all night long, he keeps practicing. And I gotta watch all this bouncing and shaking. And not just one body, but two awful bodies.
You mean he brings her home?
No, he dances in front of the mirror.
Can I look at this for you? Oh, sure. Okay.
Hey, what's happening?
Hey, Rod.
What's happening, Rod? What's happening, Dwayne?
What's happening, Rerun?
Hey, you know what? Charlene asked me to be a partner in a big dance contest Saturday night.
Oh, well, all right. I bet you two could win it.
We could, except for one little thing.
What's that?
There's a $25 entrance fee.
One little thing? That sounds like 25 big things.
I was hoping you guys could help me out.
Sorry, Rerun. I'm practically broke, man.
Yeah, me too.
But this means a lot to me. Besides, the winner gets $100. I can pay you back with interest.
Oh, no. Friends don't have to pay interest. And I don't have much on hand, Dwayne. But if we pool our resources...
That's not a pool, that's a puddle.
$2.14.
Okay, here you go. That's $2.10. Plus my usual 4-cent tip. Thank you.
Come on, Raj, think. Who has $25 to loan me?
Nobody I know.
Nobody but a loan shark.
Oh, Jaws 3.
Are you really happy to see me, or did somebody jam a coat hanger in your mouth?
Let me handle this, Raj. Come on over here, D. I want to have a little private talk with you, okay? Hey, Rob.
Yeah,
A grape soda for the young lady, please.
coming right up.
Thank you. Now, D, I've never told you this before, but I've always thought of you as the dear, sweet little sister I never had.
How much do you need?
$25.
Rerun, keep thinking of me as the sister you never had, with the money you're never gonna get.
Thanks. Hey, Shirley, I've given you a lot of tips over the years. How about returning the favor?
Gladly. You got change for a nickel?
Hold on, Shirley.
Huh?
Now, Rerun needs $25 for an interest fee for a dance contest. Which, if he wins, he'll get $100.
So what?
Come on, Shirley, listen to me. Now, Rerun is headed for some big things.
Yeah.
You could be a part of that.
Yeah, I could.
And next week, when he's standing on that disco floor and he receives the trophy,
Yeah.
you know what he's gonna say?
What are you gonna say?
He's gonna say to the huge crowd, Shirley, you had faith in me. Shirley, take it. It's yours.
I am deeply touched. You know, America has been good to me. And I like to take this time to thank...
Shirley.
No, don't do that. I like to take this time to thank... Do you think I should thank my teacher? Yeah,
Oh,
sure.
come on, Shirley.
Thank you.
No, Raj, man, give it to her. She earned it.
I thank you, Dwayne. You're a nice person. Rob, too. You think I should thank my...
Shirley, what we need is money.
Oh, no way. Sorry.
Raj, when are you gonna learn? You can't get something for nothing.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah, you are right. So, we'll form a corporation. I learned all about this in business class. May I have your attention, please? Thank you, Shirley. The bidding is now open on shares in Rerun Unlimited. Buy today and collect your big dividends Saturday night when he wins the $100 dance contest. Invest $1 now and collect $2 on Saturday.
But what if he loses?
Loses? Are you kidding? He can't lose. He's #1. He's the greatest. He's the Muhammad Ali of disco. Okay, Rerun, on your feet. Show the folks what they're investing in. All right, folks, remember, it's a good investment. $1 will get you 2. Sell it. All right, Rerun, sell it now. Sell it.
Raj, I still don't understand how this works.
It's very simple. Now, you've collected $25 for your entrance fee from the investors. Now, when you win the $100, you pay those investors $50 or a 2-for-1 return on their investment, and you keep a $50 profit. Now, do you understand that?
No.
Forget it, Rerun. Sign it.
Is this where you're giving away the $100?
Well, honey, you're gonna have to win the contest first.
Oh, he will. He has disco in his soul.
That's good, because it looks like he's got a jukebox in his shirt. That'll be $25, please. Thank you.
Hey!
I love that. So listen, is this where I sign up?
Here, use my pen.
Sure, darling, why not?
Oh, Mr. Kelly's gonna be so excited. He didn't expect any real celebs would be in the contest.
Well, darling, I just wanted to give the public another chance to see me in the flesh and love me.
Who was that?
That is Danny Domino. They call him Disco Dynamite.
Raj. 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 I remember this guy. I don't think I can beat him.
Hey, come on, man. Stop thinking like that. We got money invested in you.
But that's not enough. You saw how classy Danny looked? He looked like Saturday Night Fever, and I look like the Monday Morning Blues. I gotta give me some fancy clothes or something.
Oh, Rerun?
Look, the corporation is out of funds. There's no money for clothes. Now, come on, let's go.
You guys go ahead. I'm gonna practice some more.
Okay.
All right. Hey, Rerun.
Yeah,
My friend and I, we want a piece of the action.
you're too late.
What do you mean?
I mean, I'm only the president of my company. The treasurer just left.
Come on, don't give us that. Now, we heard you're paying 2 for 1, and we want in.
Yeah, what's the matter? Our money ain't good enough for you?
Oh, yeah, it's good enough. Matter of fact, it's great. Hi, George. And there's Abe. Get down, Mr. Lincoln.
How many shares you got left?
Well, how many you want?
Count me in for 20.
You count it in.
And I'll take 30.
Right,
And just remember, you better win, or else you'll never play the piano again.
I don't play the piano.
Don't worry, we'll give you lessons, and then we'll break both your hands. Oh, he had to pick up Charlene. He'll be here any minute.
He'd better be. I'm only here to protect my investment.
Our investment? I had to make an excuse for Rob to let me off early. Hey, I'll just take a look around.
You gonna stand around here looking dumb?
Well, I would ask a girl to dance, but I'm not sure on my approach.
It's simple, Dwayne. All you have to do is say, would you like to dance?
That's it? Would you like to dance?
Love to.
Huh?
I see you're looking for that someone special. Perhaps I could be it.
No, we're looking for Rerun.
Rerun?
Yeah, we invested $50 in him.
$50? That's impossible.
No, it isn't. I got a receipt and everything.
Wow, you're right. Yeah, that reminds me. I have to talk to Rerun right away. Thank you.
Hey, Raj, man, Rerun sure has a lot of fans out here.
What do you mean?
Well, we just bumped into some guys out here on the dance floor who said they had a big investment in it.
How much?
$50.
$50? That means he sold over $100 worth of himself. If he wins 100, he owe more than 2.
Trouble.
Hey, Sugar, what's going down? Let's get it together. Let's check out the scene.
Hey, Sugar, what's going down? Check. Hey. I couldn't dance anyhow. Hey, Sugar, what's going down? Oh, Rob. What you doing here?
Well, everybody was here, so I closed up early. What are you doing here? I thought you had to go home because you had a headache.
I did? Oh, I do. Oh, yes, I do. I came here to cure it.
You came to a disco to cure a headache?
Yeah, well, I called my doctor, and he told me to take 2 dances and call him in the morning.
Hey, what are you waiting for? Let's get down.
Yeah, let's get on down.
Hi, Charlene. Rerun, I've got to talk to you.
Not now, Raj. I gotta get dressed for the competition.
No, this is important and it's private.
Excuse me, Charlene.
I just ran into 2 girls who said they invested $50 in you.
Oh, yeah, Carla and Jan from the supermarket.
And Dwayne ran into some guys who said they invested $50 in you.
What can I say? They can't get enough of a good thing.
Rerun, you sold more of yourself than you have.
No, I didn't, Raj. I have more of me to sell. I gained weight yesterday.
Rerun.
Look, Raj, something came up and I had to get some new clothes and some new shoes. For once in my life, I want to look good. I want to look like somebody, and I want to be somebody.
All right.
Who are they?
Those are my investors.
Rerun, if you win and you can't pay everybody, those guys are gonna jump on you.
Well, what am I going to do?
I'll handle it. Dwayne, see those 2 mean-looking dudes over there?
Ooh, oh, yeah.
Get rid of them. Dwayne, you're Rerun's friend, aren't you?
Uh-huh.
And you do want to help out, don't you?
Uh-huh.
You do want to be a pal, don't you?
Uh-huh.
Get rid of those guys. Rerun, if you win and you can't pay everybody, you're going to be in serious trouble. You've got to lose. If you lose, you don't owe nobody.
All right, how's everybody doing? You know who want to know? The Spoon want to know how's everybody doing. All right, the moment's here we've been waiting for, all right?
Raj, I got to get dressed.
Just see you later.
Our first annual disco dance contest. First prize, $100 to the winner. Let's welcome our first contestant, Disco Dynamite himself, Danny Domino. You know, we first had scheduled 10 contestants for our first disco dance contest. But when they found out that Disco Dynamite himself, Danny Domino, was going to be in it, all of them just bagged right on out.
Enough love, enough.
All right. All of them backed out except one daring great dancer himself. And I want to bring him out. Contestant number 2, let's welcome Frederick Rerun.
What happened? You were supposed to hold back.
I guess I got carried away, Raj.
Our judges have reached a decision. And the winner...
I just can't believe it.
Look, Rerun, everybody loses. Napoleon had his Waterloo, Muhammad Ali had his Sphinx, and you had your Danny Domino.
And like I said, if you had won that contest, you would have been in big trouble with your investors.
That's right. 'Cause I know one investor who would have gotten your hide. Rerun losing was the best thing that ever happened to you, buddy.
I guess you're right, Shirley. I shouldn't really be so down.
Nah.
Oh, yes, you should.
What's happening, Rerun? Hey, guys, how's it going? You know, I'm sorry I lost, but I did the best I could.
Yeah, we know, but it wasn't good enough.
Well, you guys just gotta do me one favor.
A favor? You asking us for a favor?
Yeah, let me pick which part of my body you break.
Now, what kind of talk is that, Rerun? What say we go for a little walk?
Okay, but I warn you guys, I'm a purple belt.
Do something, Raj.
Hey! Listen! Do you guys think I'm gonna stand by and let you bust up my buddy? I think I'll sit instead.
Thanks, Raj.
Good move.
Hey. Now, there's nothing for anybody to fret about. We just want to talk to Rerun. We're going to make him an offer he can't refuse.
You are?
Look, Rerun, we don't believe in violence.
Yeah, unless we don't get our way. Then we believe.
Amen. Now, we're willing to forget about the money we lost on you.
You are?
Sure. You know, with so many dance contests these days, we can make the money ourselves.
That's a good idea.
Except for one thing.
Well, what's that?
We can't dance.
That's where you come in. You're going to give us and our club members dance lessons.
And our girlfriends get dance lessons, too.
Come on, guys. That's impossible. impossible. Just what do you expect me to do? Hit it, Two, three, step. 1, 2, 3, step. 1, 2, 3, step. 1, 2, 3. Ow! My foot! Okay, girls, that's enough for today. I'll see you next Tuesday, okay?
Catch you later, Rerun.
Rerun, man, how's it going?
At this rate, giving these free lessons to pay back what I owe, I won't be out of debt until 1989.
Yeah, you know, Rerun, Dwayne and I have been talking, and I guess we should remind you that we invested money in you, too.
Oh, come on, guys. What do you expect me to do?
Well...
In the humid glow of late summer Los Angeles, when the city felt like it was permanently tuned to a laugh track and the sidewalks shimmered as if someone had spilled soda on the sun itself, Roger Raj Thomas found himself standing in front of Shirley Wilson's apartment door with a crumpled flyer in one hand and a sense of destiny in the other. The flyer announcing in neon bubble letters the grand reopening of a downtown disco called the Silver Comet, promising mirrored walls, imported lights, and a cash prize for the best dance crew. A prize that Raj had already mentally spent 3 different ways before Shirley even opened the door, because Raj had a gift for turning possibilities into obligations long before they became realities. And when Shirley finally did open the door, wearing a robe that suggested both maternal authority and the exhaustion of a woman who had raised 2 boys through fads, failures, and the occasional police misunderstanding, Raj launched into his pitch. Without greeting, explaining that this disco contest was not merely a contest but an opportunity. A moment when timing, talent, and the unexploited genius of reruns could align to finally elevate them all from the gentle mediocrity of everyday survival into something shinier, something that could buy new furniture and silence overdue notices. And Shirley, squinting at the flyer, asked the most dangerous question she could ask Raj, which was how much? Because Raj answered with confidence. Instead of caution, claiming the entry fee was minimal, practically symbolic, an investment in their future. And before Shirley could respond, Dwayne Nelson emerged from the kitchen holding a bowl of cereal, his expression already forming into the practiced skepticism of a man who had been promised easy money by Raj since the Carter administration. And Dwayne read the flyer upside down, shaking his head slowly as if gravity itself disapproved, remarking that discos were for people who didn't have to wake up early, didn't have to justify their lives to family members, and didn't have to clean glitter out of their hair before job interviews. But Raj countered by pointing out that the disco was now retro, a word he pronounced with such reverence that it seemed to absolve all past mistakes, and that nostalgia was money, pure and simple, which drew Freddie Rerun Stubbs into the room as if summoned by the mention of rhythm. Rerun, already dressed in suspenders that had never once successfully contained his enthusiasm, his feet tapping unconsciously on the worn carpet as he imagined lights, applause, and the rare sensation of being admired for exactly who he was instead of tolerated. And Rerun declared that dancing was not just movement but expression, a way of telling the world that joy had not been completely priced out of existence, which made Shirley sigh the way mothers sigh when they realize resistance will only prolong the inevitable. And she agreed to let them explain the plan fully, which was Raj's favorite phrase because it suggested complexity without requiring clarity. And the plan, as it unfolded, involved borrowing a modest sum from Shirley's emergency jar, rehearsing in the living room despite the downstairs neighbor's well-documented hatred of bass, recruiting a 4th member to qualify as a crew, and investing in outfits that would catch the light, a phrase that made Dwayne wince because light-catching outfits had a habit of catching ridicule as well. Yet even Dwayne felt the pull of something that felt like momentum, because life lately had been a loop of obligations and compromises, and the idea of stepping onto a dance floor where the rules were different, where effort translated directly into applause, had a seductive simplicity, So they agreed, all of them, to try to rehearse, to risk embarrassment in exchange for the possibility of reward, and as the evening wore on, the living room transformed into a rehearsal space, furniture pushed aside, the stereo dragged out like a ceremonial artifact, and when the first disco track crackled to life, Rerun took center stage, his movements a chaotic blend of instinct and joy, arms flailing in patterns that made no technical sense but somehow commanded attention, and Raj watched with the calculating gaze of a man already envisioning posters and profit margins, while Dwayne counted beats in his head, grounding the chaos with structure, and Shirley observed from the couch, pretending to read while actually memorizing every step so she could later tell this story with accuracy and authority, and as they practiced, laughter mixed with sweat, old grievances softened under the shared absurdity of it all, and for a moment the world outside the apartment receded, replaced by a collective fantasy in which talent was rewarded and mistakes were charming instead of costly. But the fantasy began to crack the following day when Raj visited the Silver Comet in person to finalize details, a phrase that again disguised the absence of preparation, and the club, still mid-renovation, smelled of paint and ambition. The owner, a man named Vince with hair that suggested he trusted mirrors too much, explained the rules with the casual cruelty of someone who had already secured his profit regardless of who won, clarifying that the cash prize was contingent on audience votes, drink sales, and an entry bond that would be forfeited if the crew failed to perform on finals night, and Raj nodded enthusiastically, hearing only what aligned with his hopes, signing papers he barely skimmed, because Raj had always believed that confidence could substitute for comprehension, and when he returned to the apartment with the news, selectively edited to remove the more alarming clauses, the mood shifted subtly, excitement now tinged with obligation, and rehearsals intensified, tempers flaring when steps were missed, when Dwayne insisted on precision that Rerun interpreted as criticism of his soul, when Shirley reminded them that neighbors had limits and that limits were enforced by men with badges, yet progress was undeniable, their movements tightening into something cohesive, something that looked like a crew rather than a collection of personalities, and it was during one such rehearsal that Raj unveiled the costumes he had purchased on credit, shimmering shirts and flared pants in colors that defied nature, and while Dwayne protested that dignity was not an optional accessory, Rerun twirled in place, delighted by the way the fabric seemed to amplify his every motion, and Shirley, hands on hips, declared that if they were going to make fools of themselves they might as well look expensive doing it, which felt like a blessing of sorts, and the days blurred together as the contest approached, each rehearsal ending later than planned, each conversation circling back to money, to what they would do if they won, to what it would mean if they didn't, and on the night of the preliminary round, they arrived at the Silver Comet under a canopy of flickering lights, the line outside buzzing with anticipation and cheap cologne, and as they stepped inside, the bass vibrating through their chests, Raj felt the first genuine flicker of doubt, noticing the competition, crews with practiced swagger, synchronized confidence, and managers whispering strategies, and he realized that this was not a friendly neighborhood talent show but a marketplace of desperation disguised as celebration. Yet it was too late to retreat, their bond already paid, their names on the board, and when they took the stage for their preliminary performance, something unexpected happened. The nerves melted into focus, Rerun's joy became infectious, Dwayne's precision anchored the routine, Raj's showmanship filled the gaps, and the crowd responded, not with polite applause but with genuine cheers, whistles cutting through the music, and Shirley, watching from a sticky table near the back, felt pride swell in her chest despite herself because for all the chaos and questionable decisions, there was truth in what they were doing, a refusal to disappear quietly into routine, and as they left the stage, breathless and grinning, Raj clasped their shoulders, declaring victory inevitable, already talking about the finals, the money, the headlines that would never exist, and it was in that moment of triumph, fragile and unguarded, that the seeds of the disaster were fully planted, because success, even small and preliminary, had a way of amplifying Raj's worst instincts, and as the club lights dimmed and the night pressed in around them, none of them noticed Vince watching from the bar with a calculating smile, none of them considered the fine print, and none of them yet understood that the disco dollar they were chasing was already slipping through their fingers, turning celebration into obligation, rhythm into debt, and hope into a problem that would demand payment sooner than any of them were prepared to handle. The morning after the preliminary round arrived with none of the cinematic grace Raj had imagined, No triumphant sunlight slicing through curtains like a spotlight. No newspaper headlines proclaiming unexpected disco heroes. Just the familiar hum of the refrigerator and the ache in Dwayne's calves reminding him that enthusiasm always collected interest overnight. And yet despite the ordinariness of it all, something had shifted irreversibly. Because success, even the smallest measurable kind, had rearranged their internal math, making ordinary responsibilities feel negotiable and future rewards feel dangerously guaranteed. And Raj embodied this shift most completely as he burst into Shirley's kitchen waving his phone like a baton, announcing that their performance clip had been posted on the club's social board and already had comments, some sarcastic, some enthusiastic, but all of them proof that attention existed, and attention, Raj insisted, was the first currency of any real enterprise, which prompted Shirley to remind him that attention did not pay electric bills, but Raj waved this off, explaining that electricity was merely a bridge expense between now and victory, and while Dwayne poured coffee with the care of someone who did not trust his hands yet, Rerun sat at the table replaying the memory of applause in his head, tapping rhythms with his fingers, reliving moments when strangers had cheered instead of stared. And for Rerun that alone felt like profit, enough to make him volunteer extra rehearsal hours, propose new moves, and speak about the finals with a reverence usually reserved for weddings and graduations. And as plans escalated, so did expenses because Raj, emboldened by perceived momentum, suggested upgrading their routine with lighting accessories, glow bracelets, maybe even a smoke effect if they could borrow equipment, all of which required money that did not technically exist yet. And when Shirley raised the issue of the emergency jar, noting that emergencies tended to arrive without disco music, Raj countered that winning would refill the jar tenfold, transforming it from a symbol of anxiety into one of abundance. And though Shirley did not fully believe him, she also recognized the familiar stubborn glint in his eyes, the same one that had once convinced her to co-sign a lease that took years to emotionally recover from. So she compromised by setting strict limits Raj immediately interpreted as flexible guidelines, and rehearsals moved from the apartment to a borrowed community hall after neighbors complained, the new space echoing with sound and ambition. And it was there that Dwayne began to notice subtle changes in their dynamic, the way Raj took center position more often, narrating their routine as if it were already legendary, the way Rerun deferred less to structure and more to feeling, extending sequences spontaneously. And while the crowd at the club had loved that looseness, Dwayne worried about consistency, about judges and timing and the unforgiving nature of competition rules. But each time he raised concerns, Raj reassured him that the finals were about personality, not perfection, a claim that sounded inspirational but conveniently excused preparation gaps. And as the days passed, Vince, the club owner, began appearing more frequently in Raj's messages, offering suggestions framed as insider advice, hinting that crews who invested more in promotion tended to perform better with audiences, suggesting flyers, social media boosts, even a small pre-finals event that could warm up voters, all of which required fees that Raj rationalized as strategic spending. And when Dwayne finally read the contract, discovering clauses about promotional obligations and minimum drink sales associated with each crew, the mood darkened noticeably, because it became clear that winning was not simply about dancing well but about driving consumption, about turning personal effort into profit for someone else first. And when Dwayne confronted Raj, the argument unfolded with familiar beats, Raj accusing Dwayne of negativity, Dwayne accusing Raj of recklessness, Shirley attempting to mediate by translating frustration into practical questions, and Rerun, torn between loyalty and unease, retreating into silence. And yet despite the conflict, rehearsals continued, because stopping now would make the sacrifices meaningless, and humans were remarkably adept at continuing simply to justify what they had already invested. And the first real crack appeared when Raj announced he had booked a professional photographer to capture rehearsal shots for promotional use, a photographer who required payment up front. And while the photos themselves were undeniably striking, capturing Rerun mid-spin like a joyful blur, Dwayne mid-step with focused intensity, and Raj with arms outstretched as if presenting the world, the bill lingered like an accusation, and Shirley began quietly recalculating budgets, skipping small comforts, stretching groceries, telling herself this was temporary. That risk was part of living, and meanwhile the wider world responded unevenly, co-workers teasing Dwayne about his disco ambitions, old acquaintances messaging Raj with sudden interest, neighbors whispering about Shirley's boys chasing fame, and Rerun, for the first time, being recognized on the street by someone who had seen the clip online, a recognition that filled him with pride and fear in equal measure, because being seen meant being judged. And as finals night approached, the pressure intensified, Vince sending reminders about promotional targets, Raj insisting they push harder, attend after-parties, mingle, charm, and while Dwayne reluctantly participated, feeling increasingly like an unpaid salesperson, Rerun thrived in these environments, his natural warmth translating easily into crowd engagement, and Raj interpreted this as validation of his strategy, pushing further, borrowing more, promising more, until Shirley finally demanded a full accounting, laying out receipts on the table like evidence in a trial, and Raj, confronted with numbers stripped of optimism, faltered briefly before doubling down, asserting that fear was the enemy of success, that doubt had never built anything worthwhile, and though Shirley wanted to believe him, she also recognized the pattern, the way Raj framed caution as betrayal, and that night she lay awake listening to the distant hum of traffic, wondering how many times a person could risk stability before it stopped feeling brave and started feeling irresponsible. And the day before finals, disaster arrived quietly, not as a dramatic collapse but as an email from Vince outlining revised terms for finals night, including an increased bond due to high demand, a bond that Raj had neither anticipated nor budgeted for. And when Raj read the email, his confidence cracked audibly, the room filling with a silence heavier than any argument, because this was no longer about optimism or belief but about cash on hand. And as they gathered around the kitchen table, the flyer that had started it all lying there now faded and creased, the reality settled in. They were trapped between walking away and losing everything already invested or finding a way to pay and hoping the gamble finally paid out. And Rerun spoke first, suggesting they could borrow, maybe sell something temporarily, his voice earnest and terrified, and Dwayne responded with a quiet firmness, stating that borrowing to cover borrowing was how people disappeared into debt without noticing. And Shirley, looking at all three of them, felt the weight of motherhood sharpen into resolve, because regardless of dreams and applause, she would not allow this to destroy them. And yet even as she prepared to draw a line, Raj received another message, this one from a local promoter who had seen their clip and offered to sponsor part of their bond in exchange for a cut of winnings, and hope surged again, dangerous and seductive, reframing the crisis as opportunity. And as Raj read the message aloud, his voice regaining its rhythm, the room leaned unconsciously toward him, because humans were drawn to narratives that promised rescue without sacrifice, and despite Dwayne's reservations and Shirley's instincts, the group agreed to meet the promoter, not because they trusted him, but because hope had become too expensive to abandon. And as night fell, Los Angeles glowing indifferent and endless outside their windows, they stood once again at the edge of a choice, the disco dollar disaster no longer hypothetical but imminent, demanding either courage or restraint, and none of them yet knew which one would cost more in the end. The meeting with the so-called sponsor took place in a cafe that tried very hard to look artistic while clearly surviving on microwaved pastries and optimistic pricing, a neutral ground that Raj believed made the situation feel more legitimate, though Dwayne privately noted that neutrality was often where bad decisions felt safest. And the promoter, who introduced himself as Leon without offering a last name, arrived late and confident, wearing sunglasses indoors and speaking with the relaxed cadence of someone who benefited regardless of outcomes, and he praised their preliminary performance with a fluency that suggested practice rather than sincerity, telling Rerun he had raw marketable joy, telling Dwayne he had discipline that audiences trusted, and telling Raj he had vision, a word that landed with suspicious ease. And Leon explained that he specialized in micro-investments in local talent ecosystems, which Shirley translated silently as taking advantage of desperate performers, but she listened carefully as Leon laid out his terms. He would front half of the increased bond and cover limited promotional boosts in exchange for 30% of any winnings, plus exclusive rights to manage appearances for 3 months, and Raj, dazzled by the framing, immediately began negotiating upward in ambition rather than downward in risk, asking about future events, brand tie-ins, potential tours, while Dwayne interrupted to clarify worst-case scenarios, asking what happened if they didn't win. And Leon smiled thinly, explaining that losses were simply learning experiences, that risk was inherent in growth, and that his upfront contribution would be considered a sunk cost on his end, but any personal borrowing they did remained their responsibility. And that single asymmetry rang loudly in Shirley's mind, because it meant Leon's losses were capped while theirs were elastic, yet the room's momentum leaned toward acceptance, because Leon's presence made the Crisis feel managed, professional, and when Raj shook Leon's hand, sealing the agreement with a confidence that felt louder than necessary, Dwayne noticed Rerun's smile waver just slightly, a flicker of uncertainty quickly masked by enthusiasm, and as they left the cafe, Raj spoke excitedly about leverage and exposure, words that seemed to multiply in his mouth, while Shirley focused on practicalities, asking for everything in writing, insisting on copies, boundaries, clarity, and Leon complied easily, which paradoxically made Shirley more uneasy, because compliance without resistance often meant advantage was already secured elsewhere. And the next days unfolded at a pace that left little room for reflection, promotional obligations increasing, rehearsals now interspersed with appearances at small venues where they danced not for competition but for visibility, for drink sales, for the vague promise that audience familiarity translated into votes. And while Rerun thrived under constant attention, his energy seemingly self-replenishing, Dwayne began to feel the strain, the blurring of dance as expression into dance as obligation, his body becoming a tool rather than a voice, and Raj, increasingly operating in managerial mode, started giving notes not just on timing but on persona, suggesting smiles here, gestures there, moments calibrated for crowd response, and though these notes were framed as optimization, they subtly eroded the joy that had drawn them together. And Shirley watched this transformation with concern, because she recognized how quickly passion could be repackaged into product, and as finals night loomed closer, the stakes grew heavier, not just financially but emotionally, because now walking away would mean disappointing Leon, Vince, the small online following, and perhaps worst of all themselves, and the pressure culminated in a rehearsal that spiraled into conflict when Dwayne stopped mid-routine, citing exhaustion and lack of clarity, insisting they needed to simplify rather than escalate, and Raj responded sharply, accusing Dwayne of sabotaging momentum out of fear, and the argument escalated, old resentments resurfacing, Dwayne accusing Raj of chasing validation instead of sustainability, Raj accusing Dwayne of hiding behind caution to avoid risk, and Rerun trying to mediate but ultimately taking Raj's side, not out of strategy but because Raj still spoke the language of dreams, while Dwayne increasingly spoke the language of limits, and Shirley intervened decisively, ending rehearsal early, reminding them that exhaustion bred mistakes, and that no contest was worth tearing each other apart, and though the argument paused, it did not resolve, lingering like static between them, and finals day arrived with an oppressive sense of inevitability, the hours stretching oddly slow, every small task feeling monumental, costumes laid out carefully, makeup debated, last-minute promotional posts scheduled, and as they prepared backstage at the Silver Comet, the club buzzing louder than before. Packed with bodies and anticipation, the environment felt less like a celebration and more like an engine, consuming energy, producing noise, and Vince moved through the crowd like a conductor, ensuring drink quotas were met, reminding crews of obligations with a smile that never reached his eyes, and Leon appeared briefly, offering encouragement that sounded like reassurance but felt like a reminder of ownership. And when the time came to perform, they took the stage under lights that were brighter and less forgiving than before, the mirrored walls multiplying every movement, every mistake, and for the first half of the routine, everything aligned, Rerun's joy radiating outward, Dwayne's precision grounding them, Raj's presence commanding attention, the crowd responding enthusiastically, cheers swelling, and Shirley felt her throat tighten with pride. But then, in a moment that would later be replayed endlessly in memory, the smoke effect malfunctioned, releasing too early, obscuring part of the stage, confusing timing cues, and in that haze, Rerun extended a sequence while Dwayne expected a transition. Raj hesitated, the synchronization fracturing just enough to be noticeable, not catastrophic but imperfect, and the crowd's reaction shifted subtly, enthusiasm tempered by uncertainty, and they recovered quickly, professionalism carrying them through to the end. But as they exited the stage, breathless and sweating, the air felt heavier because they all knew something had gone wrong, and back in the waiting area, silence dominated, no one wanting to assign blame, because blame felt too expensive, and when results were announced later that night, the verdict landed with cruel ambiguity. They placed second, close enough to taste victory but far enough to lose the main prize, receiving a modest consolation payout that barely covered remaining fees, and the applause they received felt polite rather than celebratory. And as the crowd dispersed, Vince congratulated them mechanically. Leon offered a practiced shrug, reminding Raj that exposure still had value, that second place was still leverage, and Raj nodded numbly, the arithmetic in his head turning against him, because exposure did not repay borrowed money, and back at the apartment, the aftermath unfolded quietly, exhaustion draining any impulse toward dramatics, costumes discarded carelessly, receipts spread out again, this time without optimism, and the numbers were unforgiving, the consolation prize insufficient, Leon's cut non-negotiable, debts lingering, and the realization settled in that the disco dollar they had chased had multiplied obligations rather than erased them, and Rerun, sitting on the floor amid discarded accessories, finally voiced what none of them wanted to say, that maybe the problem wasn't the smoke or the judges or the rules, maybe it was that they had turned something joyful into something transactional, and Dwayne nodded slowly, agreeing while Raj stared at the table, his reflection warped in the glossy surface, struggling with the collision between his self-image as a visionary and the evidence of consequences, and Shirley, ever practical, began outlining next steps, repayment plans, boundaries, and as she spoke, the room gradually reoriented toward survival rather than success, and though disappointment lingered, there was also relief in the clarity, because ambiguity had been the most expensive part of all, and as night deepened, Los Angeles humming outside, indifferent to their small rise and fall, they understood that the disaster was not singular or dramatic but cumulative, a series of choices amplified by hope, and while the disco lights were now behind them, the lessons remained, demanding integration, not denial, and the question that hovered unspoken was not whether they had failed, but what they would carry forward from this collision between rhythm and reality, joy and cost, because endings like disasters were rarely clean. And this one was far from over. The days following the finals unfolded in a strange emotional vacuum, the kind that arrived after intense anticipation abruptly lost its object, leaving behind not relief exactly but a dull disorientation, as if everyone had been moving to a beat that suddenly stopped and their bodies had not yet learned how to stand still, and in Shirley's apartment this manifested as silence punctuated by practical sounds, the scratch of a pen on paper as she rewrote budgets, the clink of dishes washed more aggressively than necessary, the television murmuring reruns no one actively watched, and Raj drifted through this quiet like a man who had misplaced something essential but could not remember its shape, replaying moments from the performance in his head, adjusting steps, imagining alternate outcomes where the smoke cue worked, where timing aligned perfectly, where judges smiled just a second longer, and each imagined correction carried with it the unspoken assumption that success had been within reach, that failure was a technicality rather than a verdict, which made it harder to accept the consequences now demanding attention. And Dwayne, returning to work with sore muscles and an even sorer patience for jokes from coworkers who had followed the contest online just enough to tease, felt an unexpected heaviness settle into his chest, not because of embarrassment but because the experience had briefly offered an identity outside routine, and losing it felt like shrinking back into a version of himself he had hoped to outgrow. While Rerun experienced the aftermath differently, the applause echoing longer in his memory, sustaining him through disappointment. Yet even he could not ignore the change in how dancing now felt, each movement shadowed by calculation, by the knowledge that joy had been appraised and found wanting, and the financial reckoning arrived officially in the form of messages and calls, Leon reminding Raj of remaining obligations with a tone that blended sympathy and expectation, Vince sending invoices for promotional add-ons, and Raj responding with promises of payment that relied on future income he had not yet secured, and Shirley, recognizing the pattern hardening again, intervened decisively, taking control of communications, insisting on clear timelines, negotiating where possible, and drawing lines that Raj resented quietly but ultimately needed. And it was during one such conversation, late at night, that Raj finally admitted what he had been resisting, that he felt foolish, not just for losing money but for believing so fully that this would be different, that he could shortcut the long, slow process of stability through one bold move. And Shirley listened without judgment, because she understood that foolishness and hope often shared a border, and while she did not absolve him of responsibility, she reframed the experience as tuition, an expensive lesson rather than a defining failure. And this reframing, while not erasing debt, softened its emotional weight enough to allow forward motion, and yet forward motion proved complicated when Leon appeared again, this time not as a rescuer but as a reminder, proposing that they capitalize on their newfound exposure by booking a short run of paid appearances at small clubs, appearances that would generate modest income and potentially offset losses, but which required continued commitment under his management, and Raj, torn between resentment and opportunity, felt the old excitement stir because this was still movement, still momentum, and Dwayne reacted immediately with skepticism, questioning the fairness of terms, the sustainability of returns, and whether continuing down this path simply prolonged the same imbalance that had led them here, while Rerun, conflicted, saw in the proposal a chance to reclaim dancing as something active rather than retrospective, and Shirley weighed the options carefully, recognizing that refusing outright might limit recovery but accepting blindly risked repetition, and after long discussion, they agreed to a trial arrangement, strictly limited with clear financial goals and exit points, boundaries surely enforced with the authority of someone who had learned through necessity, and the first of these appearances took place in a modest neighborhood bar, far removed from the spectacle of the Silver Comet, the lighting uneven, the crowd small and distracted, and yet in this stripped-down environment, something unexpected happened. The pressure eased, because there were no judges, no prize beyond a modest paycheck, and, as they danced, Rerun felt his joy return in a purer form. Dwayne rediscovered satisfaction in clean execution without spectacle, and Raj, though still inclined toward showmanship, relaxed enough to enjoy the moment rather than narrate it, and the applause they received was quieter but more personal, patrons smiling, nodding, some even dancing along, and afterward, as they counted their modest earnings, the money felt earned rather than anticipated. A subtle but meaningful distinction, and over the next few weeks they repeated this cycle: small gigs, manageable crowds, income that chipped away at debt incrementally, and though it was far from glamorous, it restored a sense of agency that the contest had eroded, and Raj gradually adjusted his language, speaking less about destiny and more about logistics, less about exposure and more about scheduling, a shift Dwayne noticed with cautious approval, and Leon, sensing diminishing leverage, attempted to push for expansion but surely held firm, citing their agreement, and when Leon finally withdrew, framing it as a strategic pivot on his end, the relief in the apartment was palpable, because his departure marked a reclaiming of autonomy, and yet the experience left residue, particularly in Raj, who struggled with a quieter insecurity now that grand narratives had failed him, questioning whether his confidence was intuition or avoidance, whether ambition could coexist with responsibility without tipping into self-sabotage. And these questions surfaced unexpectedly one evening when Rerun suggested entering another competition, smaller this time, community-based, more about participation than prizes, and the room froze momentarily, the memory of smoke and contracts still vivid, and Dwayne responded first, not with refusal but with conditions, clarity, transparency, and shared decision-making, and Raj surprised them all by agreeing, acknowledging that unchecked enthusiasm had cost them, that collaboration required listening as much as leading, and Shirley, observing this exchange, felt a cautious optimism, because growth, unlike success, was rarely dramatic, but it was durable, and as they prepared for this new, humbler event, rehearsing without pressure, laughing at mistakes instead of tallying them, the disaster receded into context, no longer an open wound but a scar, instructive and contained, and on the night of the community competition, held in a high school gym with uneven acoustics and folding chairs, they performed not to impress but to share, their routine simpler, tighter, infused with the joy that had drawn them together initially, and the applause they received, though modest, felt authentic, unmediated by commerce, and when results were announced, they did not win first place, nor did they expect to, but they received a special mention for spirit, a small plaque that Rerun held like a trophy beaming and back home, as they placed it on a shelf among family photos and everyday objects. It felt appropriately scaled to their lives, a reminder that not all victories needed to be monetized to matter, and though debt still required attention and routines would inevitably reclaim space, the balance had shifted, because they now carried an awareness forged in miscalculation and recovery, understanding that disaster was not the moment of loss but the failure to learn from it, and as the city continued its indifferent rhythm outside, they found themselves better attuned to their own, capable of dancing within limits without losing themselves to them. And while the disco dollar disaster would always be part of their story, it no longer defined its trajectory, serving instead as a cautionary beat, a pause that made the music that followed more intentional, more grounded, and perhaps in its own way more sustainable. The return to routine should have felt like relief, a gentle settling after turbulence, but instead it arrived with an odd resistance, as if their lives had learned new rhythms during the disaster and now refused to slip neatly back into the old tempo. And this resistance showed itself in small ways. Dwayne lingering after work to stretch and rehearse steps alone in empty rooms, Rerun waking earlier than usual to jog and hum melodies that kept his spirits buoyant, Raj scribbling ideas in notebooks he pretended were for practical planning but which still pulsed with ambition, and Shirley observing these shifts with the attentive calm of someone who understood that transformation rarely announced itself loudly. And while debts continued to be paid down steadily through small gigs and disciplined budgeting, the emotional residue of the contest lingered, especially for Raj, whose confidence had not disappeared but had fractured into a more complex shape, one that questioned itself. Mid-sentence, and it was during this period that an unexpected invitation arrived, a call from an old acquaintance of Shirley's who worked at a community arts center, asking if they would be willing to teach a short dance workshop for local teenagers, a modestly paid opportunity that promised neither fame nor competition, just instruction and engagement, and Raj initially reacted with hesitation, because teaching implied authority grounded in mastery rather than aspiration. But Rerun's enthusiasm tipped the balance, his excitement rooted in the idea of sharing movement rather than performing it, and Dwayne, considering the structure and clarity such a role required, agreed cautiously, seeing in it a chance to reclaim dance as discipline rather than gamble, and Shirley accepted on their behalf before Raj could overthink it, because she recognized that this was precisely the kind of grounded opportunity that might recalibrate their relationship to dance and to themselves. And the first workshop day arrived with nervous energy, the arts center modest but welcoming, its floors scuffed with history, mirrors slightly warped, and the students, a mix of curiosity and skepticism, watching the trio with folded arms and guarded expressions. And as Raj attempted an opening speech about expression and teamwork, he felt the old urge to impress rise, but it faltered under the students' unfiltered attention, because teenagers were remarkably immune to inflated narratives. And it was Rerun who broke the tension, starting with simple movements, encouraging laughter, allowing imperfection, and Dwayne followed by introducing structure gently, breaking down steps with clarity and patience, and Raj, observing, adjusted, shifting from center stage to facilitator, offering encouragement, framing mistakes as part of process rather than failure. And by the end of the session, something subtle but significant had occurred. The students were engaged, asking questions, laughing openly, and the trio felt a satisfaction that differed from applause, quieter but deeper. And over subsequent weeks, the workshops continued, each session reinforcing a sense of contribution rather than extraction, and Raj found himself enjoying the role of organizer without the pressure of spectacle, coordinating schedules, managing resources, celebrating small improvements, and Shirley noticed that his language had changed again. Less about winning and more about impact, less about destiny, and more about responsibility, and though she remained vigilant, she allowed herself a measure of pride, because growth, while uneven, was evident, and outside the workshops, life continued to test their balance, because financial strain did not evaporate with good intentions, and when an unexpected expense arose, a minor car repair that threatened to disrupt budgets, old anxieties resurfaced, and Raj briefly considered taking on a risky promotional gig offered by an unfamiliar contact. But this time he paused, brought the idea to the group, and listened when Dwayne outlined potential downsides, when Shirley calculated implications, and when Rerun expressed his preference for stability over spectacle, and together they declined, a decision that felt both anticlimactic and empowering, because restraint had become a shared value rather than an imposed one. And as weeks turned into months, the disco disaster receded further into memory, not forgotten but contextualized, referenced occasionally with humor rather than bitterness. And it was during one such reflective evening, sitting around the kitchen table after a workshop, that Dwayne articulated something they had all sensed but not named, that the contest had exposed a hunger for recognition that went beyond money, a desire to be seen, valued, affirmed, and that while the disco had promised to satisfy that hunger quickly, it had also commodified it, whereas teaching, small gigs, and shared practice nourished it more sustainably. And Raj listened thoughtfully, nodding, acknowledging that he had mistaken visibility for validation. And Rerun added that dancing now felt lighter because it no longer carried the burden of rescue. It was no longer expected to solve everything, and Shirley, hearing this, felt a quiet relief, because she had worried that the experience would either embitter them or lure them back into the same patterns, but instead it seemed to have complicated them in useful ways. And yet life was rarely linear, and temptation returned in a subtler form when a local television segment featured the arts centers. Programs briefly showing clips of the workshop, including a moment where Rerun led a joyful sequence with the students, and almost immediately, Raj's phone buzzed with messages, acquaintances commenting, distant contacts expressing interest, and Raj felt the familiar thrill stir, the sense that momentum might be building again, and this time, the challenge was not avoiding disaster but integrating opportunity responsibly, and Raj brought the messages to the group, framing them not as destiny, but as data, and together they discussed boundaries, priorities, and the difference between invitation and obligation, and they agreed that any engagement would need to align with their values, support the community work, and avoid financial overreach, conditions that filtered out most offers quickly, leaving only one viable opportunity, a small feature on local talent that paid modestly and highlighted the arts center rather than promising personal advancement, and they accepted it cautiously, and the experience reinforced their evolving perspective, because the attention felt contextual rather than extractive, affirming without demanding sacrifice. And as they navigated this new equilibrium, Shirley reflected on how disaster often clarified what success could not, stripping away illusions to reveal underlying needs, and while she remained pragmatic, she also allowed herself to enjoy moments of ease, laughter returning more freely to the apartment, conversations expanding beyond finances and plans into stories, memories, and future possibilities unburdened by urgency, and Raj, gradually reconciling ambition with humility, began to see leadership as stewardship rather than command, a shift that altered how he related not just to dance but to life, and Rerun, buoyed by teaching, found confidence that did not depend on crowds, and Dwayne, grounded by structure, rediscovered pride in consistency, and together they formed a rhythm that felt authentic, adaptive, and resilient. And though challenges remained inevitable, they now approached them with a shared language forged through missteps and recovery, and as the city continued its relentless churn outside, indifferent yet accommodating, they found their place within it more deliberately, dancing not to escape but to engage, and the disco dollar disaster, once a looming shadow, now functioned as a reference point, a story told to students and friends alike as a lesson in balance, reminding them that while risk could energize life, meaning required care, and as they moved forward the question was no longer how to win, but how to continue a quieter, harder, and ultimately more sustaining pursuit. Time, which had once felt like an adversary rushing them toward ill-prepared decisions, began to stretch more generously, allowing reflection to coexist with action, and this subtle change reshaped their days in ways none of them had explicitly planned, because routines, when chosen rather than imposed, carried a different weight, and in Shirley's apartment the mornings grew calmer, coffee brewed without urgency, conversations unfolding without agendas, and yet beneath this calm lay a shared awareness that stability was not a permanent state but a practice, one that required vigilance, especially after an experience that had demonstrated how easily momentum could masquerade as progress, and Raj, perhaps more than anyone, wrestled with this awareness, because ambition did not vanish simply because it had once backfired, it adapted, rebranding itself as purpose, opportunity, or responsibility, and the challenge now was distinguishing healthy aspiration from the old compulsion to leap before looking, and this distinction became central when the Arts Center director approached them with a proposal to expand the workshop into a longer-term program, one that would involve grant applications, scheduling commitments, and a modest but reliable income stream. And while this was precisely the kind of sustainable opportunity Shirley favored, Raj felt a familiar tightening in his chest, not of fear but of restlessness, because sustainability lacked the adrenaline of risk, and yet he recognized that rejecting it reflexively would signal a failure to internalize recent lessons, and so he listened carefully as the director outlined expectations, noting how Dwayne responded with thoughtful questions about structure and curriculum, how Rerun lit up at the idea of continuity with the students, and how Shirley immediately began mapping logistics in her head, and Raj, absorbing all of this, agreed not from impulse but from consensus, a decision-making process that felt slower but sturdier. And as the program took shape, their roles became more clearly defined, Dwayne handling curriculum design and technical instruction, Rerun focusing on engagement and creative expression, Raj coordinating communication, schedules, and outreach, and Shirley overseeing finances with a steady hand that had become the group's anchor, and this clarity reduced friction, because expectations were explicit, responsibilities shared, and while disagreements still arose, they unfolded within a framework of mutual respect rather than competition, and yet even as they settled into this rhythm, the past resurfaced in unexpected ways, because one afternoon, after a particularly successful workshop session that ended with spontaneous applause from parents who had come to observe, Raj received a message from Vince, the club owner, congratulating them on their continued hustle, and casually suggesting a reunion performance at the Silver Comet's anniversary night, framing it as a redemption arc audiences loved, and the message landed like an echo, reverberating with memories of mirrored walls, smoke effects, and contracts laden with traps, and Raj's initial reaction surprised him, because instead of excitement, he felt irritation, a sense of being misunderstood, as if Vince still saw them as commodities rather than collaborators, and Raj brought the message to the group, not with enthusiasm but with curiosity, inviting discussion rather than advocating, and the conversation that followed revealed how much they had changed, because while Rerun admitted a flicker of nostalgia for the lights and energy, he also acknowledged that the environment had distorted his relationship to dance, and Dwayne articulated a firm refusal, citing misaligned incentives and unresolved mistrust, and Shirley, practical as ever, evaluated the offer through the lens of risk and reward, concluding that the symbolic value of redemption did not compensate for the potential costs, and Raj, hearing this, felt a quiet relief because the decision aligned with his evolving sense of integrity, and he declined the offer politely, firmly, without justification, a boundary that felt like closure. And as they moved forward, the longer-term program began to reveal its own challenges, because consistency required energy of a different kind, patience rather than adrenaline, and there were days when attendance was low, when students arrived distracted or disengaged, when progress felt incremental rather than transformative. And on such days, Raj struggled with the absence of visible impact, questioning whether their efforts mattered, and it was Dwayne who reminded him that growth was often invisible in the moment, cumulative rather than spectacular, and Rerun reinforced this by sharing small victories, a shy student who volunteered to lead a move, a previously disruptive teenager who began arriving early, moments that did not trend online but altered trajectories quietly, and Shirley, listening, reinforced the importance of perspective, noting that sustainability was not the absence of difficulty but the capacity to endure it without compromising values, and these conversations deepened their collective resilience, because they reframed effort not as a gamble but as an investment in people, including themselves, and outside the program, life continued to intersect unpredictably, because Dwayne was offered a promotion at work that promised financial relief but demanded longer hours, threatening his availability for workshops, and this presented a dilemma that tested their commitment to balance, and after careful discussion, they adjusted schedules, redistributed responsibilities temporarily, and supported Dwayne's decision, recognizing that stability for one strengthened the group as a whole, and this flexibility contrasted sharply with the rigidity that had characterized their approach during the disco contest, when every deviation felt like a threat to momentum, and now, adaptability felt like strength rather than concession, and Raj observed this shift with a mix of pride and humility, recognizing how far they had come from the mindset that equated intensity with importance, and yet even as they matured, temptation reappeared in subtler forms, because a regional arts grant application required a narrative of impact and innovation, and Raj, tasked with drafting it, felt the urge to embellish, to dramatize their journey into something more marketable, and as he wrote, he caught himself framing the disco disaster as a heroic failure, a necessary crucible, and while this framing was not untrue, it risked simplifying complexity into a digestible arc, and Raj paused, reconsidered, and ultimately chose honesty over spectacle, describing missteps without glorification, growth without guarantees, and when he shared the draft with Shirley, she nodded approvingly, noting that integrity was not only ethical but persuasive in its own right, and when the grant was approved weeks later, providing resources to sustain the program, the victory felt proportionate and earned, and they celebrated quietly, with takeout and laughter, acknowledging the milestone without inflating it, and as the months passed, the program became a fixture in the community, the students evolving, some moving on, others returning as mentors, and Rerun's joy deepened into purpose, his identity expanding beyond performer into guide, and Dwayne found satisfaction in seeing structure empower creativity rather than constrain it, and Raj discovered that leadership rooted in service rather than spectacle offered a steadier sense of fulfillment, and Shirley, witnessing these developments, felt a cautious contentment, because while uncertainty remained a constant companion, it no longer dictated their choices. And one evening, after a particularly reflective conversation prompted by a student asking whether chasing dreams was worth the risk, they revisited the disco disaster not as a wound but as a reference, acknowledging how close they had come to letting desperation override discernment, and how recovery had required humility, collaboration, and restraint. And Raj articulated a realization that surprised even him, that ambition was not the problem but isolation was, that decisions made alone in pursuit of validation were far more dangerous than those shaped collectively in pursuit of meaning. And this insight resonated, because it captured the essence of their transformation, and as they continued navigating the interplay between opportunity and stability, visibility and value, they did so with a shared vocabulary forged through experience. And while the city around them continued to offer glittering shortcuts and seductive narratives, they had learned to listen for the quieter signals beneath the noise, the ones that indicated alignment rather than excitement, and in this attunement lay their resilience, not immunity to disaster but capacity to respond without losing themselves. And the disco dollar disaster, once a looming cautionary tale, now functioned as a compass, pointing away from extremes and toward balance, reminding them that while rhythm could energize life, it was harmony that sustained it. And as they looked ahead, not toward a singular defining moment but toward a continuum of choices, they did so with grounded confidence, prepared not to avoid risk entirely but to engage it with awareness, because the greatest lesson they had learned was not how to win or recover, but how to continue with intention after the music faded. By the time the seventh phase of their shared story unfolded, none of them thought of it as a chapter anymore, because chapters implied neat beginnings and endings, and what they were living now felt more like a long, careful sentence that required attention to punctuation if it was not going to spiral into chaos again. And this awareness shaped how they approached even the smallest decisions, from scheduling workshops to choosing words in conversations that once would have been dominated by assumptions. And the first real test of this evolved mindset arrived not through an external temptation but through internal fatigue, because sustainability, while steadier than spectacle, demanded patience, and patience could feel like stagnation when progress was slow. And Raj, in particular, began to experience a creeping restlessness that he struggled to articulate, a sensation not unlike the early days of the disco contest when excitement masqueraded as urgency, except now the urgency was quieter, internal, and harder to justify openly, and it surfaced during moments of stillness, when he found himself scrolling through feeds filled with stories of sudden success, viral breakthroughs, and reinvention narratives that promised escape from gradualism. And although he knew better intellectually, emotionally these stories tugged at him, whispering that caution might calcify into complacency. And this tension became evident during a planning meeting for the Arts Center program's next quarter, when Raj proposed expanding their reach significantly, suggesting partnerships, showcases, and media outreach that exceeded their current capacity. And while his tone was measured, the ambition beneath it was unmistakable, and Dwayne noticed immediately, responding with questions about logistics, workload, and risk, questions that slowed the momentum of Raj's vision. And Rerun, sensing the familiar dynamic, hesitated, torn between enthusiasm for growth and loyalty to balance. And Shirley, reading the room with practiced acuity, suggested tabling the discussion to allow for reflection, a move Raj initially interpreted as resistance but later recognized as protection. And the pause proved instructive, because in the days that followed, Raj confronted the source of his restlessness more honestly, realizing that while the disco disaster had taught him restraint, it had also stripped away a part of his identity that thrived on momentum. And the challenge now was not suppressing that part but integrating it responsibly. And this realization crystallized during a conversation with one of the older students in the program, a young man who asked Raj directly whether settling for slow progress meant giving up on big dreams. And the question lingered because it mirrored Raj's own unspoken fears, and his response, improvised but sincere, acknowledged that big dreams did not disappear when approached patiently, but they did change shape, becoming less about sudden transformation and more about sustained impact. And saying this aloud clarified something for Raj, because he realized that the narrative he had been resisting was not ambition itself but the loneliness of carrying it alone. And this insight reshaped how he approached the group, and when they reconvened to revisit expansion ideas, Raj framed them differently, presenting not a vision to be chased but a question to be explored collectively. And this shift altered the conversation's tone, Because Dwayne could engage without feeling defensive, Rerun could express excitement without feeling pressured, and Shirley could assess feasibility without being cast as the obstacle, and together they identified one modest initiative to pilot, a community showcase that highlighted student progress rather than their own performance, an idea that satisfied Raj's desire for movement while aligning with their values, and as they planned the showcase, the process itself became a demonstration of their growth because roles were clearly defined, expectations communicated and contingencies anticipated, and when unexpected challenges arose, a scheduling conflict, a venue issue, a minor budget shortfall, they addressed them collaboratively rather than reactively, and this stood in stark contrast to the disco contest, where urgency had compressed deliberation and magnified errors, and the showcase night arrived without spectacle but with intention, the venue a modest community hall, the audience composed largely of families and neighbors, the energy warm rather than electric, and as students performed routines they had developed over weeks of practice, the applause felt earned, grounded in recognition of effort rather than novelty, and Raj watched from the side, experiencing a satisfaction that surprised him, because the absence of personal spotlight did not diminish the moment, it amplified it, and Dwayne felt a quiet pride in seeing structure empower creativity, and Rerun's joy radiated as he encouraged students from the wings, and Shirley, coordinating logistics seamlessly, allowed herself a rare moment of stillness to observe the scene she had helped sustain, and afterward as they cleaned up chairs and exchanged hugs, the success felt complete precisely because it did not demand more, it did not insist on escalation, and yet life as always refused to remain static, and a week after the showcase, Raj received an email from a regional arts network inviting them to apply for inclusion in a collaborative project, a project larger than anything they had undertaken since the disco contest, and the invitation reignited the old questions, because opportunity had returned wearing a more respectable face, offering legitimacy rather than hype, and Raj felt the familiar pull, but this time he resisted immediate reaction, bringing the invitation to the group without commentary, and the discussion that followed was thoughtful, nuanced, and revealing, because Dwayne acknowledged the potential benefits while outlining the resource strain. Rerun expressed curiosity, but emphasized the importance of protecting the core program, and Shirley evaluated the financial implications with cautious openness, and Raj, listening, recognized that the decision itself mattered less than the process by which it would be made, and after careful consideration, they agreed to apply with clearly defined boundaries, conditions that prioritize sustainability over expansion, and the act of applying itself felt different from previous ventures, because it was framed as exploration rather than salvation, and when weeks passed without response, the absence did not trigger panic or self-doubt, because their sense of purpose no longer hinged on external validation, and this shift became evident when a smaller disappointment arose, a grant renewal that fell through unexpectedly, threatening to reduce program resources temporarily, and while the setback prompted concern, it did not provoke the frantic scrambling that once characterized their responses to financial uncertainty. Instead, they adjusted budgets, scaled sessions slightly, communicated transparently with students, and weathered the period without compromising values, and Raj noted this resilience with a mix of relief and pride, because it demonstrated that lessons had been internalized, not just understood, and yet he also recognized that resilience did not mean emotional immunity, because moments of doubt still surfaced, particularly during late nights when he revisited old recordings of the disco performance, the lights, the near win, the alternate paths that might have followed, and these moments were tinged not with regret exactly but with curiosity, wondering who he might have become had things gone differently, and acknowledging this curiosity without letting it dictate behavior became part of his ongoing work, and he shared these reflections with Shirley one evening, admitting that part of him still mourned the loss of that imagined version of himself, and Shirley listened, patiently reminding him that mourning unrealized futures was natural, but clinging to them could distort the present, and her words resonated because they reframed nostalgia as something to be honored but not obeyed, and this perspective allowed Raj to integrate the disco disaster more fully into his identity, not as a failure to be corrected but as a story that shaped his values, and as months continued to pass, the group's cohesion deepened, their communication more efficient, their conflicts less charged, and the city around them continued to offer contrasts, stories of sudden success and quiet struggle, unfolding side by side, and they navigated this environment with increased discernment, aware that visibility was neither inherently corrupting nor inherently validating, but context-dependent, and this awareness was tested again when the Regional Arts Network responded, accepting their application under specific conditions that aligned closely with the boundaries they had set, and the acceptance felt gratifying without being intoxicating, and they celebrated modestly, acknowledging the opportunity while reaffirming their priorities, and as they prepared to engage with this new collaboration, Raj reflected on how different this moment felt from the night they had entered the Silver Comet, because then, anticipation had drowned out caution, whereas now anticipation coexisted with clarity, and this balance felt like progress, not toward a destination but toward a way of being, and the disco dollar disaster, once a looming cautionary tale, now functioned as a reference point in ongoing conversations, a shared language for identifying red flags, recalibrating expectations and grounding decisions, and while the future remained uncertain as it always would, they approached it with a steadiness born not of certainty but of practice, because they had learned that the real work was not avoiding mistakes but building systems, relationships, and self-awareness robust enough to absorb them, and in this learning lay their quiet confidence, a confidence that did not demand applause or validation but sustained them through ambiguity, allowing them to continue deliberately together, even when the music changed or faded entirely, and as they stood on this threshold between what had been and what might be, they did so without urgency, trusting that intention, once learned, could guide movement more reliably than impulse, and that was perhaps the most valuable return on the disco dollar disaster, an understanding purchased at high cost but yielding dividends not measured in cash, applause, or visibility but in the capacity to choose again and again how to move forward. The collaboration with the Regional Arts Network introduced a new texture to their lives, one that felt neither intoxicating nor oppressive but quietly demanding, because it required consistency across distance, coordination with unfamiliar partners, and an ability to articulate their values without diluting them for approval, and this challenge revealed subtleties they had not yet fully confronted, particularly around authorship and control, because while the network respected their boundaries, on paper, in practice there were moments when suggestions edged toward directives, when enthusiasm from collaborators blurred into assumptions about availability and scale, and Raj, now more attuned to these dynamics, found himself acting as a translator, not just between organizations but between past instincts and present commitments, and this role tested him in ways that felt more complex than the disco contest ever had, because the stakes were quieter, the risks incremental, and the consequences distributed over time rather than concentrated in a single dramatic night. And this distributed risk required a different kind of vigilance, one that relied less on adrenaline and more on discernment, and early meetings with the network unfolded politely, agendas full, language aspirational, and while Dwayne focused on feasibility, mapping schedules and capacities, and Shirley monitored budgets and reporting requirements, Raj listened for tone, for subtle shifts in expectation, for the difference between collaboration and extraction, and Rerun, as always, grounded discussions by asking how decisions would affect the students directly, a question that consistently recalibrated priorities, and the first joint event, a multi-site showcase streamed online, brought with it a level of exposure that stirred familiar sensations, cameras, lighting setups, promotional language, and Raj noticed his pulse quicken as technicians adjusted angles and producers discussed engagement metrics, and for a brief moment, he felt the old narrative press against him, the idea that this could be a pivot point, a moment that redefined their trajectory, and recognizing this feeling did not make it disappear, but it allowed him to hold it at arm's length, to name it internally without obeying it, and this internal dialogue became crucial during rehearsals, when production staff suggested tweaks to routines to optimize for viewing, and while some suggestions were practical, others edged toward spectacle at the expense of authenticity, and Raj found himself negotiating compromises, pushing back gently but firmly, invoking the group's core purpose not as a moral shield but as a practical foundation, and Dwayne supported these boundaries by articulating technical limits, while Shirley reinforced them by referencing agreements, and Rerun modeled adaptability without capitulation, adjusting presentation while preserving spirit, and the resulting performance, when it aired, felt representative rather than inflated, the students shining without being overproduced, and the response, while positive, was measured, not viral, not explosive, and yet deeply satisfying because it aligned with intention. And afterward, as they reviewed feedback, Raj noticed how different his emotional response was compared to the disco contest, because there was no spike followed by crash, No desperate scanning for validation, just a steady acknowledgement of work done well, and this steadiness extended into subsequent weeks, as the collaboration continued, generating small opportunities and modest recognition without destabilizing their routines, and yet equilibrium invited introspection, and Raj began to question whether his role as mediator, organizer, and boundary keeper was eclipsing his identity as a creative participant, a concern that surfaced during a particularly reflective conversation with Rerun, who admitted that while he loved teaching and mentoring, he sometimes missed being challenged creatively, pushing his own movement beyond familiar patterns, and this admission resonated because it echoed Raj's own unspoken tension, and they brought this to the group, framing it not as dissatisfaction but as curiosity, and the discussion that followed was rich, because it acknowledged that sustainability did not mean stagnation, that growth could occur within boundaries if space was intentionally created for it, and Dwayne proposed structured creative labs within the program, sessions focused on experimentation without performance pressure, and Shirley evaluated resource implications, approving a pilot on a small scale, and Raj felt a renewed sense of engagement, because this approach honored ambition while containing risk, and the first creative lab unfolded awkwardly at first, participants unsure whether to treat it as rehearsal or play, but as the session progressed, barriers softened, movement became exploratory, laughter punctuated concentration, and Raj found himself dancing again, not as a performer chasing applause but as a participant, exploring possibility, and the experience was unexpectedly emotional, because it reconnected him to the origin of his ambition, before it had become entangled with validation and rescue fantasies, and afterward as they debriefed, Raj articulated this realization, acknowledging that ambition need not always aim outward, that internal exploration could be just as expansive, and this insight deepened the group's cohesion, because it validated multiple dimensions of growth, and yet life continued to introduce complexity because the network, encouraged by early successes, proposed scaling the collaboration further, suggesting additional sites and expanded programming, and while this proposal was framed as opportunity, it also carried the risk of overextension, and the group faced a familiar crossroads, albeit in a subtler form, and this time the decision-making process was methodical, data-driven, and value-centered. They assessed capacity honestly, considered impact on existing commitments, and weighed potential benefits against strain, and Raj noticed how different this felt from the disco days, because there was no urgency to prove worth, no sense that declining would erase relevance, and after thorough discussion they opted for a phased approach, agreeing to expand incrementally with built-in evaluation points, a compromise that balanced ambition and restraint, and the network accepted these terms, a small but significant affirmation of their evolved stance, and, as implementation began, the workload increased, testing their systems, but the structures they had built absorbed the pressure without fracturing, and Shirley's careful oversight prevented financial drift, Dwayne's planning ensured instructional quality, Rerun's engagement sustained morale, and Raj's coordination maintained alignment, and this synergy reinforced their confidence, not in invincibility but in adaptability, and still, moments of vulnerability surfaced, particularly when Raj encountered public narratives that oversimplified their journey, articles and posts framing them as a comeback story, a redemption arc following a dramatic failure, and while the attention was not harmful, it flattened nuance, and Raj felt a twinge of discomfort, because it echoed the same narrative compression that had fueled earlier mistakes, and he addressed this by being deliberate in interviews, emphasizing process over outcome, community over spectacle, and while not all audiences resonated with this framing, those who did engaged more meaningfully, and this selective resonance felt appropriate, because not all stories needed universal appeal, and one evening, after a long day of workshops and meetings, Raj found himself alone in the Arts Center, the space quiet, mirrors reflecting an empty room, and he allowed himself to revisit the disco disaster one more time, not as regret but as inquiry, tracing the emotional arc from excitement to disillusionment to recalibration. And he recognized that the disaster's most enduring impact was not the debt or the embarrassment, but the disruption of a narrative he had unconsciously adopted, the belief that transformation required a dramatic rupture, and now, living within a different rhythm, he saw that transformation could also be cumulative, iterative, and relational, and this realization brought a sense of peace, because it aligned with the life he was actually living rather than the one he had imagined, and when he shared these reflections with Shirley later that night, she smiled gently, noting that wisdom often arrived disguised as disappointment and that the trick was not avoiding pain but allowing it to teach without hardening the heart, and her words lingered, because they captured the essence of their collective journey. And as the months continued to unfold, the collaboration stabilized into a sustainable partnership, the program deepened its roots, and the group's identity solidified not around a single achievement but around a practice of alignment. And while challenges persisted, funding fluctuations, scheduling conflicts, occasional creative disagreements, they were navigated with a maturity forged through prior missteps, and the disco dollar disaster, once an acute crisis, now functioned as a shared reference invoked when needed, not to shame but to orient, a reminder of how easily momentum could override intention, and how deliberately intention now guided momentum. And as they stood on the cusp of another year, reflecting on what had changed and what remained unresolved, they did so without urgency, understanding that progress was not a finish line but a cadence, one that required listening as much as movement, and in this listening they found a resilience that did not depend on applause, prizes, or validation, but on the quieter satisfaction of coherence, of living in a way that felt congruent across roles, relationships, and aspirations. And this coherence, while less visible than spectacle, proved far more sustaining because it allowed them to continue dancing, teaching, organizing, and choosing with awareness, even as the music shifted unpredictably, and that perhaps was the most meaningful outcome of a disaster that had once threatened to define them, but instead had taught them how not to be defined by a single moment, a single loss, or a single dream. And as the story pressed forward, not toward resolution but toward continuation, they carried this lesson with them, a quiet compass calibrated through experience, pointing not toward the brightest light but toward balance. And it was this balance that now shaped their steps, ensuring that whatever came next, they would meet it together, attentive, grounded, and capable of adapting without losing themselves. The transition into the new year arrived without ceremony, not marked by countdowns or declarations but by subtle shifts in rhythm, as schedules recalibrated, expectations evolved, and the collaborative ecosystem they had built began to test itself under the weight of routine, because novelty had faded and what remained was structure, and structure, Raj learned, was both stabilizing and revealing, because it exposed habits, blind spots, and unresolved tensions that excitement had previously masked. And this exposure unfolded gradually, starting with minor frictions, missed emails, delayed responses, small misunderstandings about responsibility, and while none of these issues were catastrophic, their accumulation created a low-level hum of strain, and Raj, sensitive to these currents, noticed how easily old patterns could resurface when attention drifted, because sustainability demanded not just good design but ongoing care. And during a planning meeting one afternoon, when a partner organization expressed concern about inconsistent communication, Raj felt a familiar tightening in his chest, a reflexive urge to overcompensate, to promise fixes immediately, to absorb blame proactively, and this instinct, rooted in years of managing crises through personal sacrifice, surfaced quickly, but this time he paused, allowing silence to create space, and instead of assuming responsibility alone, he framed the concern as a systems issue, inviting the group to examine workflows collectively, and this reframing shifted the conversation, distributing ownership and prompting constructive adjustments, and afterward, Shirley commented on the importance of that pause, noting how easily urgency could distort judgment, and Raj recognized that this ability to slow down, to resist reflexive heroics, was a hard-won skill, one forged through earlier failures including the disco disaster, and as weeks progressed, this measured approach became more intentional, embedded into their practices through regular check-ins and reflective sessions, and these moments of reflection surfaced deeper questions about identity and direction, particularly for Raj, who found himself increasingly aware of the gap between external perception and internal experience, because while the program was gaining modest recognition, articles and testimonials praising its impact, his own sense of fulfillment fluctuated, sometimes buoyed by meaningful interactions, other times dampened by administrative fatigue, and this ambivalence confused him because success, even redefined success, was supposed to feel unequivocally good. And during a late-night conversation with Dwayne, Raj articulated this confusion, admitting that some days he missed the clarity of singular ambition, the simplicity of wanting one thing intensely, and Dwayne listened thoughtfully, acknowledging that multiplicity, holding many values simultaneously, was inherently more complex, and that complexity often felt like dilution even when it was actually expansion, and this perspective resonated because it reframed Raj's discomfort not as failure but as adjustment, and still, adjustment required patience, and patience was tested when an unexpected challenge emerged, a funding review triggered by shifting priorities within the regional network, and while no immediate cuts were announced, uncertainty crept in, unsettling assumptions and prompting contingency planning, and this uncertainty revived dormant anxieties because it echoed the precarity they had faced post-disaster, and Raj noticed how quickly his mind began rehearsing worst-case scenarios, scaling back programs, letting people down, losing momentum, and recognizing this cognitive spiral, he sought grounding through conversation, bringing the concern to the group transparently rather than internalizing it, and the collective response was pragmatic. They reviewed reserves, explored diversification options, and reaffirmed core commitments, and this collective resilience mitigated fear, because it demonstrated that vulnerability no longer equated to collapse, and parallel to these organizational dynamics, Raj's personal life subtly intersected with his professional journey, as relationships adjusted to his evolving commitments, and one particular relationship, with an old friend from his disco days, resurfaced unexpectedly, prompted by a message referencing an article about the program, and their subsequent exchange reopened memories of that era, nights fueled by adrenaline and fantasy, and as they met for coffee, nostalgia mingled with awkwardness because while they shared history, their present realities diverged sharply, and during the conversation, his friend joked about whether Raj missed the spotlight, and while the question was casual, it struck deeply because it forced Raj to articulate something he had not fully clarified even to himself, and after a moment he responded honestly, acknowledging that he missed aspects of performance but not the dependency on validation, and that this distinction mattered, and his friend nodded, intrigued but unconvinced, and as they parted, Raj felt both connected and distanced, realizing that some chapters could be revisited without being reopened, and this realization extended to his relationship with the past more broadly, because he began to see the disco disaster not as a rupture dividing before and after, but as one moment within a longer continuum, and this continuity softened his self-judgment, allowing him to integrate rather than compartmentalize, and this integration manifested creatively during a new initiative within the program, a storytelling component inviting participants to reflect on moments of failure and learning through movement and narrative, and Raj initially hesitated, concerned about recentering trauma, but as sessions unfolded, he witnessed participants reclaiming agency through articulation, framing setbacks as sources of insight rather than shame, and this process mirrored his own internal work, reinforcing the idea that meaning was constructed through interpretation as much as experience, and one particular session stood out, when a participant shared a story of public embarrassment that had led to withdrawal and fear, and through guided exploration, transformed that memory into a sequence emphasizing resilience and humor, and observing this transformation moved Raj deeply, because it echoed his own journey from humiliation to humility, and afterward, he reflected on how teaching often clarified what one was still learning, and as spring approached, the program hosted a small internal showcase, deliberately modest, inviting community members to witness work in progress rather than polished performances, and this framing shifted expectations, encouraging presence over evaluation, and the event unfolded with imperfections, missed cues, uneven transitions, but also with authenticity, laughter, and connection, and the audience response, warm and engaged, validated this approach, and Raj felt a quiet pride because this event embodied lessons learned through trial and error, prioritizing process without abandoning ambition, and yet, challenges persisted because shortly after the showcase, the funding review concluded with a recommendation to reduce support over the following year, not eliminate it, but taper it, and this news required strategic recalibration, and while disappointment surfaced, it did not trigger panic, because contingency plans were already in motion, and this preparedness was itself evidence of growth, and the group convened to discuss next steps, exploring alternative funding streams, scaling adjustments, and partnership renegotiations, and Raj noticed how differently he experienced this moment compared to past crises, because while uncertainty remained, his sense of self was not entangled with the outcome, and this separation allowed clearer thinking and collaborative problem-solving, and during this process, he also confronted personal limits, recognizing that sustained leadership required rest and delegation, and he began to intentionally step back from certain tasks, empowering others, and while this shift initially felt uncomfortable, it ultimately reduced burnout and fostered shared ownership, And one evening, after a long but productive meeting, Raj walked home reflecting on the subtle transformation underway, because his life no longer revolved around singular highs or lows, but around a series of choices aligned with values. And while this rhythm lacked dramatic flair, it offered durability, and he acknowledged moments of longing for simplicity, for the intoxicating clarity of wanting something so badly it eclipsed everything else. But he also recognized that such clarity often demanded sacrifices he was no longer willing to make, and this acceptance felt like maturity rather than resignation. And as he prepared for sleep, he revisited the question that had lingered since the disco days, whether ambition could coexist with contentment, and increasingly, his lived experience suggested that it could, if ambition was redefined not as escape, but as engagement, not as proving but as contributing, and this redefinition did not eliminate desire, but it tempered it with context. And the next morning, as he entered the arts center, greeted by familiar faces and ongoing work, he felt grounded, aware that while the future remained uncertain, his relationship to that uncertainty had changed, and this change, subtle yet profound, marked a turning point, not in external narrative but in internal orientation. And as the story continued to unfold, shaped by collective effort and individual reflection, Raj understood that the disco dollar disaster, once a source of acute pain, had become a reference point not for fear but for wisdom, a reminder of how easily momentum could mislead and how deliberately intention could guide. And carrying this understanding forward, he stepped into the next phase with measured optimism, prepared to adapt, to learn, and to continue navigating complexity with awareness, knowing that whatever challenges emerged, they would be met not with frantic grasping but with thoughtful response. And this approach, cultivated over time, promised not certainty but resilience, a quality that, while less glamorous than sudden success, proved far more sustaining in the long arc of a life committed to creativity, community, and growth. The gradual reduction in funding did not arrive like a closing door but more like a narrowing hallway, each step forward requiring slightly more awareness of posture, pace, and balance. And this metaphor stayed with Raj as the months unfolded, because it captured the sensation of continuing without the luxury of sprawl, of learning how to move deliberately without mistaking constraint for punishment. And this learning process reshaped not only the organization's operations but also Raj's internal landscape, because scarcity, even anticipated scarcity, had a way of surfacing buried assumptions, especially the belief that value was proportional to scale, and dismantling this belief required active effort, not just intellectual agreement. And early on the group made pragmatic decisions, reducing the frequency of large events, consolidating workshops, and prioritizing depth over reach. And while these choices were sensible, they carried emotional weight because they forced acknowledgement that growth would no longer be measured by expansion alone. And Raj noticed how this shift unsettled him at first, because expansion had once served as a proxy for relevance, and letting go of that metric felt like stepping into ambiguity. And ambiguity, though less dramatic than crisis, was more persistent, because it lingered in everyday decisions, and during planning sessions questions like, "Is this enough?" or "Are we doing too little?" surfaced repeatedly. And rather than dismissing them, Raj encouraged open discussion, framing them as signals of care rather than doubt, and this reframing softened defensiveness, allowing the group to examine motivations honestly. And one insight that emerged was that contraction, when intentional, could sharpen identity, clarifying what was essential and what had been habitual. And acting on this insight, they revisited their mission statement, not to rewrite it entirely but to annotate it, adding contextual notes that articulated what the mission looked like under different conditions: abundance, stability, and constraint. And this exercise grounded them, because it translated abstract values into practical guidance. And Raj felt a sense of alignment, seeing words become tools rather than slogans. And parallel to organizational adjustments, Raj's personal creative impulses resurfaced in unexpected ways, not through grand projects but through small, self-directed experiments, brief movement sketches, improvised sequences recorded on his phone, reflections written late at night. And these acts, unburdened by expectation, reignited a sense of play he had not realized was missing. And this playfulness gradually influenced his leadership style, making him more flexible, more curious, less rigid about outcomes. And others noticed the shift, commenting on a lighter atmosphere during meetings, a greater willingness to explore alternatives without anxiety. And this atmosphere proved valuable when an unforeseen opportunity arose, an invitation to collaborate with a local community center on a limited-term residency, modestly funded but aligned closely with their core values, and while earlier versions of Raj might have dismissed it as too small to matter, he now recognized its potential for meaningful engagement, and after discussion they accepted, viewing it as a laboratory rather than a showcase, and the residency unfolded slowly, embedded in the rhythms of the neighborhood, with participants of varied ages and backgrounds, and this diversity challenged assumptions, because teaching methods had to adapt, language simplified without condescension, and expectations recalibrated, and Raj found these adaptations stimulating, because they demanded presence rather than performance. And one afternoon, during a session with older participants, a conversation emerged about memory and movement, about how bodies carried stories differently over time, and this conversation resonated deeply because it echoed Raj's own negotiation with memory, particularly memories of failure and ambition, and inspired. By this exchange, he facilitated an exercise inviting participants to translate personal memories into simple gestures, and witnessing these gestures, tentative yet expressive, moved him profoundly, because they demonstrated that creativity persisted independent of age, status, or recognition, and this realization reinforced his evolving understanding of purpose, that creativity was not a ladder to climb but a field to cultivate, and this metaphor stayed with him, influencing how he approached both work and self-reflection. And as the residency progressed, the group documented experiences not for promotion but for learning, collecting observations, questions, and moments of resonance, and reviewing these materials later. Raj noticed a pattern, that the most impactful moments were often the least planned, arising from attentive listening rather than strategic design, and this observation challenged his lingering attachment to control, reminding him that leadership could involve facilitating conditions rather than directing outcomes, and this insight proved timely, because internal tensions surfaced soon after, when a disagreement arose between Dwayne and Shirley regarding resource allocation, and while the disagreement was respectful, it highlighted differing priorities, operational efficiency versus financial prudence, and Raj, witnessing this, resisted the urge to mediate immediately, instead allowing space for perspectives to be fully articulated, trusting that clarity would emerge through dialogue. And this trust paid off, because the discussion evolved into a nuanced plan that balanced both concerns, and afterward, Shirley remarked on the value of being heard without interruption, and Raj recognized that restraint could be as impactful as intervention. And outside of work, Raj's personal relationships continued to evolve, shaped by his changing orientation toward ambition and time, and he found himself more selective about commitments, declining invitations that did not align with his current priorities, and while this selectivity occasionally sparked guilt, he learned to interpret it as discernment rather than withdrawal. And one evening during a quiet dinner with Rerun, they reflected on how their definitions of success had shifted over the years, and Rerun shared that he no longer fantasized about fame but about continuity, about being able to do meaningful work without burning out. And this confession resonated deeply because it articulated a desire Raj shared but had not named explicitly, and naming it brought relief, because it legitimized a quieter aspiration. And as summer approached, the group faced another decision point, whether to apply for a competitive grant that could significantly boost resources but would require extensive reporting and potentially influence program direction. And the discussion around this application was complex, weighing opportunity against autonomy, and Raj noticed how past experiences informed his perspective, because he was acutely aware of how external incentives could subtly reshape priorities, and after thorough deliberation, they decided to apply but with clear internal boundaries, agreeing on non-negotiables and exit criteria. And this decision reflected a mature balance, neither rejecting opportunity reflexively nor embracing it uncritically, and the application process itself became an exercise in articulation, forcing them to clarify impact, methodology, and values. And while demanding, it also strengthened internal coherence, and regardless of the outcome, Raj recognized that the process had intrinsic value, and this recognition marked a significant shift from earlier years, when outcomes had overshadowed process almost entirely. And during this period, Raj revisited the disco disaster once more, prompted by a workshop exercise on personal narratives, and this time, he framed it not as a cautionary tale but as a formative experience that revealed both vulnerability and capacity, and articulating it this way felt liberating because it allowed him to honor the ambition of his younger self without romanticizing the consequences. and this balanced perspective influenced how he mentored others, encouraging them to pursue goals passionately while cultivating reflective practices, and he noticed that this approach resonated because participants engaged more openly, sharing fears and aspirations without feeling judged. And this openness reinforced the sense that the program's true impact lay not in spectacle but in fostering spaces for honest exploration. And as the year progressed, incremental successes accumulated, a positive evaluation from the community center, renewed local support, modest fundraising achievements, and while none of these developments made headlines, together they formed a stable foundation, and Raj felt a growing confidence rooted not in external validation but in lived alignment. And this confidence was tested when an unexpected media inquiry arrived, proposing a feature framing the group as a story of redemption after failure. And while such exposure could be beneficial, Raj hesitated, wary of narrative simplification, and after discussion, they agreed to participate but insisted on framing the story around learning and community rather than redemption. And while the resulting piece did not fully capture nuance, it avoided sensationalism, and Raj accepted this imperfection as part of engagement with broader audiences, recognizing that control was never absolute. And this acceptance marked another internal shift because he no longer perceived misrepresentation as a personal threat, and instead viewed it as an opportunity to refine his own understanding. And as autumn arrived, bringing cooler air and a sense of transition, Raj reflected on how far they had come since the disco days, not in terms of distance traveled but in depth gained, and he acknowledged moments of lingering doubt, because growth did not erase uncertainty, but it contextualized it, and uncertainty, he learned, could coexist with commitment. And one evening, alone in the studio, he danced quietly, not rehearsing for anything specific, just moving, and in that movement, he felt gratitude, not for success or recognition, but for continuity, for the ability to keep engaging with what mattered, and this gratitude grounded him, because it did not depend on circumstances remaining favorable. And as he prepared for the next phase, aware that challenges would continue to arise, he felt equipped not with answers but with practices, reflection, dialogue, and adaptability. And these practices, cultivated through experience, promised resilience, and as the story pressed forward, shaped by cumulative choices rather than dramatic turns, Raj understood that the true legacy of the disco dollar disaster was not avoidance of risk but a recalibrated relationship to it, one that honored aspiration while respecting limits. And this relationship, dynamic and evolving, would continue to inform decisions, interactions, and self-understanding, guiding him through whatever narrowing hallways or open fields lay ahead. And with this awareness, he stepped forward, attentive, grounded, and ready to continue the work, not as a quest for redemption but as an ongoing practice of alignment, creativity, and care. The grant decision arrived on an ordinary morning, tucked into Raj's inbox between routine updates and scheduling confirmations, and its ordinariness was almost disorienting, because the message contained news that earlier versions of himself would have experienced as seismic. The application had been approved, not at the highest funding tier but at a substantial level, enough to stabilize operations for 2 years and allow cautious growth. And yet instead of elation, Raj felt a complex blend of relief, curiosity, and restraint, as if his emotional response had matured alongside his decision-making process. And this tempered reaction prompted reflection, because it signaled how profoundly his relationship to success had shifted. And when he shared the news with the group later that day, the response mirrored his own: smiles, measured excitement, immediate questions about conditions and expectations, and a collective instinct to read the fine print before celebrating. And this instinct, once absent, now felt ingrained, and as they reviewed the grant terms together, Raj observed how naturally the group referenced their pre-established non-negotiables, cross-checking requirements against values, ensuring alignment, and this alignment generated confidence, because it affirmed that external support no longer dictated internal direction, and once compliance details were clarified, they allowed themselves a moment of acknowledgement, not exuberant celebration but shared appreciation. And Rerun suggested marking the occasion with a simple dinner, not toasting achievement but honoring continuity, and this framing resonated, because it emphasized process over milestone, and during the dinner, conversation flowed easily, touching on practical plans, creative ideas, and personal updates, and Raj felt a sense of belonging that was less intense than past highs but more enduring, because it was rooted in mutual trust rather than shared adrenaline. And in the weeks that followed, the influx of resources required careful integration, new responsibilities, expanded reporting, and the temptation to accelerate initiatives, and Raj noticed how easily abundance could recreate pressure, because opportunity invited ambition, and ambition, even redefined, required management, and to counteract this, he proposed a deliberate pacing strategy, allocating time not just for implementation but for reflection, and while this slowed visible progress, it reduced stress and preserved clarity, and this approach proved particularly valuable when onboarding new collaborators, because it allowed space for relationship building rather than transactional engagement, and Raj took an active role in these early conversations, articulating the program's ethos explicitly, not assuming shared understanding, and this articulation clarified expectations on both sides, reducing friction, and through these interactions, Raj became increasingly aware of his evolving leadership identity, one less focused on charisma or vision setting and more on cultivation and coherence, and while this identity lacked dramatic flair, it felt authentic, and authenticity, he discovered, generated its own quiet authority, and this authority was tested during a challenging moment, when a new partner proposed a high-visibility event that conflicted subtly with the program's pedagogical approach, and while the proposal was attractive in terms of exposure, it risked shifting focus toward performance at the expense of learning, and Raj felt the familiar tension, the pull between saying yes to opportunity and protecting integrity, and this time, he approached the decision methodically, consulting the group, articulating concerns transparently, and inviting dissent, and the resulting discussion was nuanced, weighing benefits against risks, and ultimately, they declined the proposal, offering an alternative collaboration that aligned more closely with their values. And while the partner's response was lukewarm, Raj felt at peace with the decision, because it reflected intentional choice, rather than reactive avoidance, and this peace extended into his personal life, where he noticed a growing capacity to tolerate ambiguity without self-reproach, and this tolerance manifested during conversations with family members who still framed success in traditional terms, asking about scale, recognition, and financial stability, and while Raj understood their concerns, he no longer felt compelled to justify his path defensively, instead explaining his work in terms of impact and sustainability, and while not all listeners fully grasped this framing, the act of articulating it strengthened his own conviction, and conviction, he learned, did not require consensus, and parallel to these external dialogues, Raj's internal dialogue continued to evolve, particularly around memory, because as the program matured, younger participants began to ask about its origins, curious about the disco dollar disaster they had heard referenced indirectly, and deciding how to tell this story required discernment because he wanted to convey lessons without glorifying recklessness or minimizing pain, and during one session, he chose to share a simplified version, focusing on the emotional arc rather than specific details, emphasizing how unchecked ambition had eclipsed judgment, and how recovery involved not erasing desire but contextualizing it, and the participants listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions, and Raj sensed that the story resonated not as cautionary spectacle but as relatable human experience, and this response affirmed his approach, because it demonstrated that vulnerability, when framed constructively, could foster connection without undermining authority, and this insight informed his mentorship style, encouraging openness balanced with responsibility, and as months passed, the program's rhythm stabilized under the new funding, allowing for incremental innovations, including expanded creative labs and community partnerships, and while these initiatives increased workload, the structures they had built absorbed the pressure more effectively than before, and Raj noticed how his stress responses had changed, because while fatigue still occurred, it did not escalate into panic, and when he sensed early signs of overload, he addressed them proactively, delegating tasks, renegotiating timelines, and prioritizing rest, and this self-awareness, once absent, now felt integral to his leadership practice. And outside of structured work, Raj continued his personal creative exploration, not seeking public platforms but cultivating a private practice that nourished him, and occasionally, he shared these explorations informally with trusted colleagues, and these exchanges, intimate and unpolished, reminded him that creativity did not need an audience to be meaningful, and this reminder buffered him against the resurgence of ego-driven impulses, and yet, he acknowledged that desire for recognition had not vanished entirely, because it resurfaced unexpectedly when an old acquaintance posted a video of a large-scale performance that garnered widespread attention, and Raj felt a familiar flicker of comparison, a momentary questioning of his own path, and rather than suppressing this feeling, he observed it, tracing its origins and acknowledging its persistence, and this observation diminished its power, because it transformed impulse into information, and information he could work with and he shared this moment with Shirley during a walk, and she responded with empathy, noting that growth did not require erasing desire but learning how to hold it without letting it steer. And her words resonated, reinforcing the theme that had woven through their journey, integration rather than elimination, and this integrative approach extended to how Raj viewed success stories in general, because he began to see that narratives emphasizing singular triumphs often obscured the sustained effort required to maintain them. And this perspective deepened his appreciation for the quieter achievements unfolding around him. The consistency of workshops, the trust of participants, the stability of partnerships, and these achievements, while less visible, constituted the infrastructure of meaningful work. And as the year approached its end, the group conducted a comprehensive reflection, reviewing outcomes, challenges, and learning, and this reflection revealed both progress and unresolved questions, because growth introduced new complexities, and Raj welcomed these questions, because they signaled vitality rather than stagnation. And during the reflection, he articulated a realization that surprised him, that he no longer sought to be exceptional in the way he once had, but aspired to be reliable, adaptable, and responsive, and naming this aspiration felt liberating, because it aligned with his lived experience, and the group responded positively, affirming that reliability had become one of their defining strengths, and this affirmation mattered, because it validated a shift that might otherwise have felt like compromise. And as winter settled in, bringing shorter days and introspective moods, Raj found himself reflecting more frequently on time, not as a resource to be optimized but as a medium through which growth occurred. And he recognized that his earlier fixation on dramatic change had obscured the value of gradual transformation, and this recognition fostered patience, not passive patience but active engagement with process. And one evening, alone in the studio, Raj revisited movement exercises inspired by earlier workshops, integrating gestures associated with memory, failure, and learning. And as he moved, he felt a sense of continuity across his life stages, because the impulses driving his younger self had not disappeared but had been reshaped by experience, and this continuity dissolved the perceived divide between who he was and who he had become, and this dissolution brought peace, because it allowed him to honor his full trajectory without privileging or condemning any single phase. And as he prepared for the upcoming year, aware that new challenges would emerge, he felt grounded in practices that supported resilience, reflection, and collaboration, and this grounding contrasted sharply with the instability that had characterized the disco disaster period. And yet, he did not view the past with regret, because he recognized that without that rupture, he might not have cultivated the discernment he now possessed. And this reframing transformed memory into resource, and carrying this resource forward, Raj stepped into the future with cautious optimism, not expecting smoothness but trusting his capacity to navigate uneven terrain. And this trust, built gradually through lived experience, felt more durable than confidence rooted in success alone. And as the story continued to unfold, shaped by choices both deliberate and emergent, Raj understood that the disco dollar disaster would always be part of his narrative, not as a defining failure but as a formative chapter, one that taught him how to align ambition with awareness, desire with responsibility, and creativity with care. And this alignment, dynamic and ongoing, would continue to guide him, offering not certainty but orientation. And with this orientation, he remained committed to the work, the people, and the process, prepared to adapt, reflect, and continue forward, attentive to both the narrowing hallways and the open fields that lay ahead, knowing that meaning was not found in avoiding risk but in engaging it wisely. And this wisdom, earned through experience rather than bestowed by success, was the quiet legacy of a disaster that had once threatened to consume him, but had instead taught him how to live more fully within complexity. The final months of the second year unfolded with a quiet density, a feeling that time was both stretching and settling, as if the work, the relationships, and the lessons had begun to layer rather than rush forward. And Raj sensed that this phase was less about initiating change and more about recognizing what had already taken root, because stability, once achieved, revealed subtler forms of movement, shifts in perception, in habit, in the way effort was distributed across days. And this recognition required attentiveness, because without drama to announce it, growth could easily be overlooked, and Raj found himself increasingly reflective, noticing how his mornings had changed, beginning not with urgency but with orientation, reviewing priorities with curiosity rather than anxiety, and this tone carried into the organization, where planning sessions felt grounded, less reactive, more intentional, and as the grant period moved toward its midpoint review, the group prepared documentation not as a performance but as an honest accounting, acknowledging both successes and limitations, and this honesty, once a source of fear, now felt natural because it aligned with their internal culture. And when the review concluded positively, affirming impact while offering constructive feedback, Raj experienced a muted satisfaction, one that lacked the sharp edge of triumph but carried depth, because it validated process rather than spectacle, and this validation reinforced his evolving understanding that sustainability was not the absence of challenge but the presence of adaptive capacity, and adaptive capacity, he realized, was cultivated through practices rather than promises, and these practices were now embedded in daily routines, regular reflection, shared decision-making, clear boundaries, and respect for limits, and as these routines normalized, Raj noticed a paradox, that the less he fixated on proving success, the more effective the work became because energy was no longer siphoned into performance anxiety, and this efficiency freed space for deeper engagement, particularly with participants. And one afternoon during a workshop, a participant asked Raj what kept him motivated after so many years, and the question caught him off guard, because earlier answers centered on ambition or impact no longer felt accurate, and after a pause, he replied that curiosity sustained him, curiosity about people, about movement, about how change unfolded over time, and saying this aloud clarified something internally, because it named a motivation that felt renewable rather than consumptive, and this articulation stayed with him, shaping how he approached subsequent interactions, framing challenges as inquiries rather than obstacles, and this inquiry-based orientation proved valuable when the organization encountered an unexpected transition. A long-term collaborator announced their departure to pursue a different path, and while this departure was amicable, it disrupted established rhythms, and Raj felt a familiar pang of loss, not panic but sadness, because continuity mattered deeply to him now, and honoring this feeling, he initiated a thoughtful transition process, prioritizing relationship closure alongside logistical handover, and this care mitigated disruption, allowing the organization to absorb change without fracture, and through this process, Raj recognized how his leadership had matured, because he no longer equated stability with stasis, understanding instead that continuity required accommodating change gracefully, and this understanding extended to his self-concept, because he began to see his own identity as fluid rather than fixed, capable of evolving without losing coherence, and this perspective softened lingering fears about aging, relevance, and legacy, because it reframed legacy not as a static achievement but as an ongoing influence expressed through practices and relationships. And one evening, reflecting on this, Raj revisited memories of the disco contest, not with analytical distance but with compassion, picturing his younger self brimming with desire, unaware of limits, driven by urgency, and instead of judgment, he felt tenderness, recognizing that intensity had been genuine even if misguided, and this tenderness integrated past and present, allowing him to hold both without contradiction, and this integration influenced how he engaged with younger participants, because he no longer felt compelled to steer them away from risk entirely, but rather to equip them with reflective tools, encouraging experimentation tempered by awareness, and this approach fostered trust, because it respected agency rather than imposing caution, and as the program continued, this trust deepened, creating a learning environment where failure was not feared but contextualized, and Raj observed participants becoming more resilient, more articulate about their processes, and these observations affirmed the program's direction, because they demonstrated that values translated into lived experience. And outside of work, Raj's personal life settled into a rhythm that mirrored his professional balance, relationships characterized by presence rather than intensity, evenings marked by simple rituals, walks, conversations, moments of solitude, and while this life lacked dramatic peaks, it offered consistency, and Raj found that this consistency nurtured creativity rather than stifling it, because it provided a stable base from which curiosity could emerge. And during one such quiet evening, Raj revisited the question that had haunted him since the disco disaster, whether he had settled for less, and this time, the question dissolved upon inspection, because it assumed a linear hierarchy of value that no longer aligned with his lived reality, and instead, He recognized that he had chosen differently, not less ambitiously but more discerningly, and this recognition brought a sense of closure, not to ambition itself but to the narrative that equated worth with spectacle. And as the year drew toward its conclusion, the organization hosted a modest anniversary gathering, inviting participants, partners, and community members to reflect collectively. And the event unfolded without fanfare, featuring conversations, shared meals, informal demonstrations, and stories exchanged organically. And Raj moved through the space observing connections, noticing how relationships intersected, how participants supported one another. And this observation filled him with quiet pride, because it embodied the ecosystem they had cultivated. And during a closing circle, participants were invited to share reflections, and one comment stood out. A participant described how the program had taught them to stay with discomfort long enough to learn from it, rather than rushing toward resolution. And hearing this, Raj felt a deep resonance, because it articulated the central lesson of his own journey, distilled through communal experience. And this moment crystallized his understanding of impact, because it demonstrated that the most meaningful outcomes were often intangible, embedded in mindset shifts rather than measurable outputs. And as the gathering concluded, Raj felt a sense of completeness, not finality but coherence, because the arc from disaster to discernment felt integrated rather than fragmented. And in the days that followed, he allowed himself a period of rest, stepping back intentionally, trusting the systems in place. And during this pause, he reflected on the story he had been living, recognizing that while it lacked the dramatic redemption arc often favored in narratives, it offered something more durable, a model of growth grounded in reflection, relationship, and restraint. And this durability mattered, because it suggested a path forward that did not depend on constant escalation. And as he prepared for the next chapter, Raj acknowledged that uncertainty would persist, funding landscapes would shift, partnerships would evolve, personal desires would resurface in new forms, and challenges would continue to arise. And yet, he felt equipped, not with certainty, but with orientation, a compass shaped by experience pointing toward alignment rather than acclaim. And this compass, he trusted, would guide future decisions, helping him navigate both opportunity and constraint with awareness. And in this trust, Raj found peace, not as an endpoint but as a practice, one sustained through ongoing attention and care. And as the narrative of the disco dollar disaster settled into memory, it transformed fully from a wound into a resource, a reference point that informed judgment without dictating identity. And this transformation marked the true resolution of the story, not because challenges had ceased, but because Raj's relationship to challenge had changed. And standing at this juncture, he felt gratitude, not for the disaster itself, but for the discernment it had ultimately cultivated. And with this gratitude, he stepped forward, ready to continue the work, not driven by the need to escape or prove, but guided by curiosity, responsibility, and connection, knowing that whatever unfolded next would be met with presence, reflection, and a willingness to learn. And in this willingness, he recognized the quiet strength that had emerged from the ruins of a disco dream, a strength that did not seek the spotlight but sustained the dance long after the music had changed.